Chapter 646. The person who appeared behind Frozen and Lai Shan was none other than their boss, North Sea. Under Lu Wu's astonished gaze, Dark North raised his hand and forcefully pressed Frozen's head onto the ground. Frozen immediately held onto his hand with a pitiful expression. He looked very pitiful, which was the complete opposite of his previous arrogant and domineering appearance. "Boss, why are you here? Hurry up and hide. This guy is most likely a spy from the heavenly realm," Lai Shan whispered. Hearing this, Dark North loosened his grip on Icebound's head and glared at Lai Shan, saying, "Spy my ass. Open your eyes and look at what he's holding." Upon hearing this, Lai Shan looked at the seal of heaven in Lu Wu's hand again. Then, a confused expression appeared on his face. "Boss, I've never seen this before. I don't recognize it." "That's right, boss. What is this?" "It looks a little like the god seal of the Baki Divine clan, but there's still a big difference in appearance." "What is this?" Frozen stood up and looked at North Sea with a wronged expression. "I don't know, Lai Shan, and neither do you." Dark North angrily slapped the back of Frozen's head, causing him to stumble. As if he was still angry, Dark North raised his palm and began to slap Frozen's buttocks. In the face of North Sea's brutality, Frozen did not dare to resist at all. He could only blink his eyes pitifully and almost shed tears. She looked like a naughty child who was being beaten by her parents. Lu Wu felt relieved when he saw her. "Who asked you to be arrogant? Who asked you not to cooperate? Who asked you to show off?" At this time, Frozen, who was being beaten up, felt extremely wronged. "Why is it fine if Lai Shan doesn't know me, but I get beaten up if I don't? How can the boss be so biased? If it wasn't for the fact that I couldn't beat you, otherwise I would definitely beat you up 100 times more cruelly, and beat you until you begged for mercy." After beating him up for a while, Dark North felt that it was enough. He raised his head and looked at Lu Wu. "Let's talk somewhere else." Upon hearing that, Lu Wu put away the heaven seal in his hand. "All right." Following which, the four of them transformed into phantoms and vanished, leaving behind the Hell's players, who were still in a daze and trembling in fear. Although they did not understand what was going on, they felt that their camp was safe. Following Dark North, they crossed mountains and rivers along the way. The four of them arrived in front of a volcano. At this time, North Sea jumped into the crater, and Frozen and Lai Shan immediately followed. Seeing this, Lu Wu leaped into the volcano as well. As they descended, the scenery around them changed. Although lava was flowing, there was no heat at all. When he landed, Lu Wu realized that it was all an illusion. The volcano was already covered by a layer of ice. Underneath it was a world of ice and snow with a village inside. Under North Sea's lead, Lu Wu walked into the village. He was surprised to find that the people of the Ice and Snow clan, the Earth-breaking clan, and the others who had left with North Sea and the others were all living here. "Have you been hiding here all this while?" Lu Wu asked curiously as he looked at North Sea, who was walking in front of them. "No, for safety's sake, we moved to another place regularly. We only came here recently." Dark North turned to look at Lu Wu and said, "Thank you for your hard work. I chose it myself. Don't feel burdened. I will walk this path no matter what. At least, this is the path I believe to be the strongest." Dark North shook his head and smiled. "Boss, who is he? He used to work in Baki? Why don't I know him?" Frozen asked curiously. Upon hearing that, Dark North raised his head and slapped Frozen to the ground. "What do you mean by working in Baki? Be more polite with your words." Frozen nodded, feeling wronged. In his heart, he kept cursing Dark North, the old bastard. After walking for a while, Lu Wu followed Dark North to the innermost area of the village. In a moment, they were in front of a stone wall that was covered with runes. Through the analysis of the artifact, Lu Wu found that the function of these rune formations was to block detection and perception. Seeing this, Lu Wu was speechless. At this moment, Dark North stood still and turned to look at Lu Wu. He said, "Can you tell me why you are here this time?" It's just a coincidence. The land of Naraka is vast and boundless. I didn't expect to meet you again. Dark North was about to speak when Frozen interrupted. Boss, who is he? Why are you being so secretive? Dark North glared at him and said, Didn't you hear what I said before? He is your ancestor. Ancestor? Frozen immediately looked at Lu Wu, his face full of questions. Great ancestor? Frozen immediately looked at Lu Wu, his face full of question marks. Which ancestor? The one who is the best at fighting. Dark North said angrily. Isn't the best at fighting Ancestor Bailey? Frozen leaned back, a look of disbelief appeared on his young face. That was in the past, not the current me. Lu Wu said. Hiss. I think I understand now. You are the reincarnation of the ancestor. Frozen suddenly understood the reason. You can take it that way, Lu Wu nodded, but he did not explain further. At this moment, Frozen suddenly understood why his boss only beat him up and not Lai Shan. At this moment, the indignation in his heart disappeared, but the way he looked at Lu Wu became very strange. There was respect, curiosity, and even more confusion. By the way, since we have met, I would like to ask you for a favor, Lu Wu said. Just tell me, I will definitely help you. After all, you are one of us. This time, before Dark North could speak, Frozen patted his chest and said. Looking at Frozen's friendly face, Lu Wu was very speechless. Thinking of his ugly and arrogant face before, and looking at his flattering face now, how hypocritical! Dark North, who was standing at the side, did not speak. He only looked at Lu Wu, waiting for him to continue. Here's the thing, I need the power of the rules that you have mastered. I don't need a lot, just a little will do. It won't affect you at all. Lu Wu said immediately. Since he had met Dark North, Frozen, and the others, Lu Wu naturally did not want to miss this opportunity. After all, it was necessary to collect the godly seal of the rule. The growth of the players was so fast that it was inevitable for them to reach the godly state. It would be awkward if they could not become a god by then. Dark North was slightly surprised when he heard this, but he still nodded. Sure, but what should we do? It's very simple. Relax your mind and don't let your soul resist, and I can extract a fragment of the rule from your soul. Lu Wu said. Okay. Dark North immediately agreed. At this moment, Frozen and Lai Shan also nodded in agreement. At this moment, Lu Wu was inexplicably touched. In fact, completely opening one's soul to oneself was a very risky move. If one did not have absolute trust, no one would give the initiative of the soul to another, because it was equivalent to handing one's life to another. Let's start, it's too dangerous for you to stay here. Get what you want and leave as soon as possible, Dark North suddenly said as he looked at Lu Wu, who was silent. Hearing this, Lu Wu nodded and opened the voice channel with Lil Bailey block. Foodie, get to work. Okay, Big Meat Shield boss. A sweet voice was heard, and then Lil Bailey's figure appeared next to Lu Wu. After the illusory figure appeared, Lil Bailey looked at Dark North and said, Old man, long time no see. Now surrender and be a good boy for the operation. Dark North was stunned when he saw Lil Bailey. Dark North was no stranger to her, because she was always by his master's side, Bailey. However, he did not expect that even after his master had reincarnated, she would still be by his side. At this moment, Lil Bailey condensed an operating table and patted it. Did you hear that, old man? Come and lie down, it's time for the operation. Dark North was silent. He went straight to the operating table and lay down. Seeing this scene, Frozen and Lai Shan were very surprised. If anyone dared to talk to Dark North like this in the past, they would definitely be beaten up. However, this little girl was so arrogant, and Dark North did not show any signs of exploding. It was a little unbelievable. Who is she? Frozen could not help but ask Lai Shan in a low voice. Lai Shan heard this and immediately shook his head. She might be your ancestor, It's always good to be polite. Frozen was speechless. After Dark North lay down and relaxed his mind, Lil Bailey began the operation to remove the rule fragment. Although Lu Wu felt that he could do it now, he was still too unfamiliar with it, so he decided to let Lil Bailey do it. It was more reliable. Otherwise, if Dark North did not die in the hands of the Heaven Realm, he might die in his own hands. After all, it was a subtle operation at the soul level. If her little hand shook, she would lose her life. The process was very fast. In less than half an hour, Lil Bailey had removed a small piece of the rule fragment from Darknorth's soul. At the same time, Lu Wu took out the heavenly demon list and recorded it. Next, Frozen and Lai Shan received Lil Bailey's rule extraction surgery. After that, Dark North called Big Fire, who was in the village, over and also received Lil Bailey's surgery. After everything was done, Lu Wu looked happy. This time, he collected a total of 13 rule powers. They were Frozen's Ice Rule, Lai Shan's Earth Rule, Big Fire's Fire Rule, and Dark North's Fighting Will Rule, Violence Rule, Fist Rule, and so on. At this moment, Lu Wu felt that he had become stronger. At least after the activation of the God mode, the choices of the players would also become more diverse. After everything was done, Lu Wu put away the Heavenly Demon record. After hesitating for a while, he looked at Dark North and said, "Actually, you don't have to run anymore. I have a way to protect you now." Dark North heard this and immediately shook his head. "Although I don't know what your way is, if you want to hide in one place forever, then forget it. The path that I'm taking is only the beginning of killing gods. As my strength increases in the future, I will inevitably continue to kill gods and plunder the divine fire. Hiding now is only temporary. Sooner or later, I will declare war on the heavenly realm again. Old man, you're promising. I have high hopes for you." Lil Bailey cupped his fists and said with admiration. Dark North heard this and rolled his eyes, but did not say anything. Everyone had their own ambitions. Since Dark North had his own ideas, Lu Wu temporarily dismissed the idea of pulling him into the artifact space. Then, Lu Wu took out a coin that was condensed from 100 million soul coins from the channel and tossed it to Dark North. "This is for you. It will be very helpful for your cultivation." Dark North reached out and took the coin with a puzzled expression. However, when he felt the majestic waves of soul power in the coin, he immediately understood what Lu Wu meant. Just like what Lu Wu said, if he absorbed all the soul power inside, it would indeed be very helpful for his cultivation. "Thank you very much." Dark North accepted the coin without hesitation and nodded at Lu Wu solemnly. "If I kill a god in the future, please keep the divine rule mark for me. It will be very useful to me," Lu Wu said with a smile. Dark North nodded and was about to speak when Frozen looked at Lu Wu eagerly and said, "Great Ancestor, I want it too. When I become stronger, I will also be able to kill a god and help you obtain the divine rule mark." Lu Wu was speechless as he looked at Frozen's obedient face. Looking at Frozen's obedient face, Lu Wu was speechless. After thinking for a while, he tossed a coin that was condensed from 100 million soul coins. After all, Frozen was a descendant of his previous life. It was not too much to give him a red packet as a way to take care of his descendant in his previous life. After receiving the coin that was condensed from soul coins, Frozen's face was filled with joy. He held the coin in his hand and played with it, as if he could not bear to part with it. When Lai Shan saw this scene, he opened his mouth, as if he was thinking about what to say. After a while, he looked at Lu Wu with a solemn face and said, "Great Ancestor, I can be considered as your descendant. My Lai Shan clan is also a force that is loyal to the Baiki Divine clan, so you are also my great ancestor." Lu Wu was speechless. Lu Wu could understand the meaning behind Lai Shan's words even with his toes. Of course, as the great ancestor, he could not be biased. "I must have a gift too." After thinking for a while, Lu Wu condensed a coin and tossed it to Lai Shan. Great Ancestor. Although the Molten clan is not a direct descendant of the Bakey Divine clan like the Ice Snow clan, our ancestors are still loyal to the Bakey Divine clan. You can't be biased. At this time, Great Fire, who had been silent all this while, could not help but ask for a gift when he saw that Lai Shan had received one. At this moment, Lu Wu was dumbfounded. Why did it feel like a group of kids surrounding their elders during Chinese New Year and asking for red packets? How old are you guys? How old am I? How shameless are you to ask me for a red packet? However, since he had to bear the title of the Great Ancestor, Lu Wu could only tearfully take out another 100 million soul coins and tossed it to Great Fire. While Frozen and the others were overjoyed, Lu Wu decisively chose to return to the artifact space. At this moment, his figure and Lil Bei Li's figure slowly disappeared on the spot. Otherwise, he was afraid that this group of shameless people would be even more shameless. However, Lu Wu believed that this red packet would come back. North Sea walked the ultimate path of the god slaying and divine fire. Obviously, Frozen and the others would not be an exception and would definitely choose this path. With the existence of this group of god slayers, Lu Wu believed that there would be a lot of rule seals in the future. His own rule collection plan would also have a group of pioneers. Chapter 647. The Land of Tsangshu, Hidden Dragon City. Since the launch of the server, after 3 years of battles, the land of Tsangshu had been unified by the European server players. The Hidden Dragon Village had also been moved to the area where His Excellency Tsangshu's palace was originally located, and was subsequently built into Hidden Dragon City. The new target of the European server's conquest had also expanded from land to sea and land, developing at the same time. Their main target was the land of Chunyo in the west of the land. The players' aggressive invasion had ignited the flames of war. After probing each other, the battle of large territories had quietly begun. At this time, outside Hidden Dragon City, countless European server players were busy running back and forth. There was a huge black formation beneath their feet. At this time, these players were following the instructions in the live chat channel, placing the corresponding spiritual materials at the designated positions, and working together to perfect this huge formation. On top of the city gate, Li Xing, who was the commander, looked at the formation that was getting more and more perfect. His face was filled with anticipation. He then turned to look at the Evil King and said, "Boss Evil King, is this reliable? Is this thing really as strong as you say?" "Nonsense, otherwise why would I waste so much energy on this with you? Do I have nothing better to do?" the Evil King said speechlessly. Upon hearing this, Li Xing nodded. Then, he looked at the huge formation below and Reinhardt, who was standing in the middle of it. His face turned solemn. The 2 cross-border battles that started some time ago had not only stimulated Li Xing, but also the European server players. Not to mention the original server that had always been ahead of them, even the Naraka server, which was launched later than them, had combat power that was not much weaker than them at this stage. It seemed that they would surpass them at any time. This made Li Xing and the other European server players feel a sense of urgency. For this reason, they had specially investigated the reason for the rapid development of the Naraka server, and found that it had a lot to do with the Naraka NPC, Eric. He provided the Naraka players with a huge database and help with supercomputing power, which was why the technological development of the Naraka server was so rapid. At this moment, as the well-deserved leader of the European server, Li Xing thought of the Evil King. Therefore, he specifically looked for the Evil King and asked if there was any way to quickly help the European server players grow. However, the result disappointed Li Xing because the Evil King had no way to help a large group of players develop rapidly. In fact, that was the case. The growth of the players was already very rapid in Evil King's eyes. The players had achieved the combat power that would take hundreds or even thousands of years for a native faction to cultivate. Even if he was knowledgeable, he couldn't think of a way to grow faster than the players. But just when Li Xing thought he had to think of another way, the evil king made a suggestion. Although he couldn't help the players grow, he had many super spells, and any one of them was extremely powerful. Although these spells couldn't be cast by a single player, they could be cast together as a group. Hearing this, Li Xing was instantly excited. In fact, the European server's players had always been using group spells. For this reason, they developed the Undead Legion, Charging Legion, Spell Entanglement Legion, and other kinds of collective spellcasting combat methods, which had significant effects on the enemy. So when he heard the evil king say that there was such a powerful spell that required cooperation, how could he not be tempted? Although it couldn't help them grow in level, it was what they lacked at the moment to increase their combat power. Therefore, under the evil king's guidance, Li Xing obtained 5 super spell formations. The minimum configuration of each spell formation required the cooperation of more than 30 players. The more the number, the more powerful the spell. The formation that was set up outside the city gate was one of the 5 super spells, the Nether Dragon formation. This formation was different from the other 4 formations as it required a large amount of spiritual materials to be set up successfully. But according to the evil king, if this formation was set up with the highest consumption of spiritual materials, it might be able to summon the Nether Dragon that had the power of a demigod. The evil king also explained the summoning principle to Li Xing. The Nether Dragon formation was actually a primer, which was equivalent to a space communication device. The fixed spiritual materials were items that had to be offered to the Nether Dragon that was to be summoned. If the Nether Dragon agreed to be summoned, it would actually sign a contract with the summoner when it passed through the formation. After that, it wouldn't be able to reject the summoner's order for a period of time, and the summoner would also have to offer the spiritual materials as tribute according to the request. Under the witness of the 6 realms of reincarnation, any party that violated the contract would be punished. However, if the Nether Dragon refused to be summoned, then the spiritual materials of the formation would not be consumed at all. Since the Nether Dragon did not sign a contract with the summoner, the spiritual materials wouldn't be offered as a sacrifice. Li Xing wasn't surprised by the evil king's explanation of the Nether Dragon. Although it was a game, it had always been one of the characteristics of Battle Royale that the details were done perfectly. If it were any other game, a summoning would be a summoning without any explanation. However, after playing Battle Royale for 3 years, Li Xing took the initiative to learn and wouldn't treat it like an ordinary game. This was because knowledge in this area might be useful in other aspects of the game. As someone who wanted to play Battle Royale for the rest of his life, it would always be beneficial for him to learn more about this world. There was a reason why he spent so much money to set up the Nether Dragon formation. Naturally, he wasn't like Niefeng, who sometimes spent a lot of soul coins just to conduct an experiment. This time, the Nether Dragon formation was specially prepared for Reinhardt. As the number 1 tank in the European server, and also the top-ranking super tank knight in the entire server, Reinhardt's combat power was divided into 2 parts. One part came from the mount, while the other came from himself. When combined, he could unleash a combat power that was not equal to 2. Perhaps it was due to the restrictions of the environment in the land of Tsangshu, there weren't any powerful mounts that Reinhardt could sign a contract with. This caused Reinhardt to be unable to unleash the power of a Dark Knight to the fullest even though he had a strong inheritance. In fact, the most suitable mount for a knight was usually a flying mount. However, it couldn't be an ordinary flying mount. It had to be an all-round mount that could fight on the sea, land, and air without any hindrance. Among them, a flying dragon mount was also one of Reinhardt's first choices. However, the problem was that such creatures didn't exist in the land of Tsangshu. This also caused Reinhardt to be very envious of Yi Shui, from the original server, because he had a fire dragon as a pet. If this pet was his mount, he would definitely be able to unleash more than 10 times his combat power when he was in Yi Shui's hands. However, all of this was just wishful thinking. First of all, the pet could not be sold. Even if it could be traded, Yi Shui, who was not short of money, would definitely not choose to sell it to him. Therefore, Reinhardt's current idea was to travel far away when his strength reached the Ghost King realm and go to other big regions to look for powerful flying creatures. However, this dream was about to be realized in advance. This was because this time, Li Xing had prepared for a long time to create this huge formation to help him obtain an ideal mount. As long as he succeeded, his strength would be greatly improved. A demigod mount would also allow him to become the #1 player in the entire server in a short period of time. He had no idea how long it would last, but he knew that no one would be able to surpass him in a short period of time. This was also the reason why Li Xing chose to do this. After witnessing Nie Feng's powerful performance in the cross-border battle, it wasn't just the players from the Naraka server who were stimulated. He wasn't the only one who had the idea of creating a superweapon like Eric. Although Li Xing's approach was different from Eric's, their goals were the same: to create a killer weapon that could decide the outcome of a battle for their server. At that moment, the formation was nearing completion. The evil king, who was standing on the city gate, began to observe the formation. At the same time, he pointed out the mistakes in the formation. Then, Li Xing pointed them out and corrected them in the live chat channel. This process lasted for about an hour before the evil king finally nodded and said, "We can summon it now. There's no problem with the formation anymore." Li Xing was excited and worried at the same time when he heard that. After all, this formation cost a lot of money. Just like Nie Feng, it was a Krypton technique. However, Nie Feng's funds were collected from a large number of players, while this formation was funded by the guild itself. Although most of the funds were provided by the tycoons in the guild, this formation was entrusted with the strength of the entire guild. All the members had high hopes for it. After confirming that there was no mistake, Li Xing looked at Reinhardt, who was standing in the middle of the formation, and said in the live chat channel, "Reinhardt, the evil king said that there's no problem. Activate the formation." Reinhardt, who was below, was excited when he heard that. In the battle, every player had their own pursuit: equipment, attributes, profession growth, and so on. However, to Reinhardt, who had changed his profession to Dark Knight, his biggest pursuit had never been these. It was a super mount. This was much more beneficial to him than equipment and the like. Reinhardt felt like he was surrounded by happiness when he thought about how he would have a demigod-level mount if he succeeded this time. After brewing his emotions for a while, Reinhardt took a deep breath and pressed his hand on the crystal at the eye of the formation, activating the formation. Instantly, several energy lines spread out from the crystal in the center. They passed through the energy nodes and spread outward like a spider web. In the end, the entire formation was lit up by the energy lines. In an instant, a black wind blew in the surroundings and soon, the entire formation was enveloped by the wind. At the same time, on the Nether Dragon Peak far away in Hell, countless Nether Dragons sensed the summoning from the outside world. At that moment, the choice began. It was like a race to answer. The Nether Dragons who met the requirements of the summoning would be summoned away first. At the same time, the list of tributes that the summoner was willing to pay was already listed in their minds. While waiting, one of the Nether Dragons couldn't resist the temptation and chose to agree. Instantly, the contract was signed successfully. Its figure flew into the space tunnel that was formed. According to the conditions of the contract, it would be under the supervision of the 6 paths of reincarnation for 24 hours in exchange for a huge reward. To this Nether Dragon, this deal was not a loss at all. At least, that was what it felt at that moment. However, when it flew out of the space tunnel, it realized that there were many figures in front of it. At the same time, a submission contract appeared in its mind. Chapter 648. The dark dragon flew out of the spatial tunnel and roared ferociously at the sky, announcing its arrival. However, at this moment, the submission contract appeared in its mind. At this moment, the dark dragon seemed to be in disbelief. It turned to look at Reinhardt, who was standing beside it. Summoner, are you crazy? You can talk? Reinhardt was also stunned. Then, he was pleasantly surprised. Apart from Sun Chi, this was the first time he had seen a mount that could talk. Thinking of this, he immediately opened the analysis interface and began to observe the dark dragon. Hacker, Demigod Level 1. Creature details. Dark Dragon, a gregarious creature that lives on the Black Dragon Peak in the Big Domain of Hell. The race has extremely terrifying racial talent and physical strength. Most of the race has the strength of a demigod. Although they are not among the strongest races in the Big Domain of Hell, they can still dominate a part of the domain. Creature status, growth stage. Seeing the introduction of the Dark Dragon, Reinhardt was elated. The introduction said that this dark dragon was still in its growth stage, which meant that it still had a lot of potential to be unearthed. This was definitely good news for him. I'm a demigod. Why can't I speak? Hacker said arrogantly. Then cut the crap. Let's quickly sign the contract. From now on, we will be good brothers. Reinhardt patted the dark dragon's thigh in satisfaction. Hearing this, Hacker could not help but widen his eyes. Who are you brothers with? You summoned me with tributes. Hurry up and tell me the task. I will go home after I finish it. My request is for you to become my mount and follow me for eternity. You specially spent so many spiritual materials to summon me just to listen to your jokes? Hacker was stunned. I am very serious. When you submit to me, we will be brothers. In the future, follow me and conquer this world. You are definitely the stupidest creature I have ever seen. If not for the restriction of the contract, I will swallow you. Hacker glared. Since you can't swallow me, I order you to quickly agree to the submission contract and become my mount. Reinhardt smiled proudly. However, as Reinhardt waited, Hacker did not agree. Instead, he looked at him with disdain. Why didn't you agree? That can't be. Aren't you unable to resist my orders? Reinhardt was stunned. Don't you know that you can't order me to harm myself? Hacker smirked. F***CK, who made this rule? Reinhardt was dumbfounded. This contract was originally obtained by the ancient underworld Dragon King in order to amass wealth. He swore an oath to the 6 paths of reincarnation. How could he make a contract that would harm his own people? That's why I think you're too foolish. It's over. The material is wasted. Reinhardt's smile froze on his face when he heard this. According to the original script, he thought that as long as he gave the order, Hacker would follow it. He did not expect that there was a clause in the contract that prevented Hacker from harming him. Most importantly, Hacker's strength was at the demigod realm, so it was impossible for him to use force to subdue him. In the previous Cross-World War, just a single demigod expert from Celestial Realm had exhausted the combat power of 5 servers. Now, however, Celestial Realm was the only guild in the area. Since there's no mission, I'll just wait here until the time is up. What a pleasant trip, Hacker said with a smug expression. Reinhardt was constipated when he heard this. He did not know what to say. Just then, Li Xing's question sounded in his live chat channel. What's wrong? Hurry up and tame the underworld dragon. Boss, don't mention it. The contract stipulates that I can't order the underworld dragon to harm itself. So, it's impossible for him to agree to the contract of submission. So, you can only tame it by force and force it into a dying state. Li Xing's voice sounded again. Boss, you must be joking. How can we defeat a demigod underworld dragon? That's easy. Hurry up and order him to exhaust his energy. We'll attack when he's exhausted. Reinhardt was stunned when he heard Li Xing's reply. Then, a malicious smile appeared on his face. What are you smiling at, stupid creature? Hacker looked at Reinhardt in disdain. Come, do 10,000 push-ups for your future master. Do them as fast as you can. At this moment, Hacker's expression froze when he heard this order. He became very uncomfortable because he could not resist this order. However, he still did not move. Instead, he looked at Reinhardt in confusion and asked, "How do I do push-ups?" Reinhardt was speechless. He had no choice but to demonstrate it himself. Hacker, who could not resist, could only bite the bullet and start doing rapid push-up. 10,000 push-ups were completed in the blink of an eye. At this moment, Reinhardt continued to speak. "Come, do another 100,000. Continue to do as fast as you can." Hacker was furious. However, he could only do as he was told in the face of this order. Just like that, Hacker was on the verge of exploding. He was sure that the underworld dragon tribe had never met such a perverted employer in all of history. Other employers basically paid a huge price to summon them for battle. It was also Hacker's first time meeting such a perverted employer who was summoned purely to toy with them. Perhaps this was the first time in the history of the underworld dragon tribe. "Which region is this? Once our contract is over, I'll definitely fly back and eat you," Hacker said to Reinhardt angrily as he sat down and did push-ups. "Cut the crap. Add 10 more sets and speed up. Don't waste time," Reinhardt said bluntly. When Hacker heard this, he could only grit his teeth and continue doing rapid push-up. As time passed, Hacker was on the verge of tears. For the first time, he felt that time was passing very slowly. He really wanted to go home. He really regretted taking this job. "Brother, why don't you tell me to stop first? Let's discuss again. How about we reduce some of the tributes?" Hacker said in a negotiating tone. "Who's your brother? That's impossible. You only have 2 choices now. Either you submit or you do push-ups. The evil dragon curses you. Shameless fellow, I will definitely find you and eat you. Just you wait, I will make you live in fear for the rest of your life." "How can you talk to your master like that?" This time, change to frog jumps. Jump 1 round around Hidden Dragon City. Jump as fast as you can. Let's go. Hacker, %@ hashtag and at asterisk hashtag yen Reinhardt, how dare you scold me? Later, I will make you crawl around Hidden Dragon City upside down. On the city wall, the evil king couldn't help but laugh when he saw this scene. In this world where the strong preyed on the weak, he really couldn't think of anyone else other than the players who would do this. Spending a lot of money to summon a demigod realm dark dragon as a toy to play with. Every player is really a genius. I can't help but be impressed. Li Xing, who was at the side, looked extremely solemn when he saw that the dark dragon was still full of energy despite scolding him. This time, they had bet a lot of money to summon the dark dragon. If they failed in the end, they would suffer a huge loss. However, it seemed that the consumption of energy did not have much effect on the dark dragon at all. Time was especially precious now. Thinking of this, Li Xing looked to the south where the land of Beiki was located. Chapter 649. Facing the dark dragon Hacker who was unwilling to surrender, Reinhardt could only resort to a special method. He planned to exhaust it before suppressing it by force. However, it was clear that this move was nothing to Hacker, whose body had reached the demigod realm. No matter how Reinhardt tortured him, Hacker showed no signs of exhaustion. Instead, he scolded and scolded with vigor. 3 hours passed quickly. Just when Reinhardt was at his wit's end, Li Xing's voice rang in the live chat channel. "Reinhardt, bring the dark dragon to the mansion of the dead in Beiki." Upon hearing this, Lionheart could not help but be startled. "Boss, what do you mean?" "Attack the mansion of the dead." At this moment, Reinhardt's eyes widened. "Boss, are you serious?" "Nonsense. At this stage, we can't tame the dark dragon at all. We can only rely on external forces." "Then why don't you bring the dark dragon to attack the land of Chunyo instead of Beiki?" Reinhardt asked the doubt in his heart. "Do you want the dark dragon to die?" "What we want is for the dark dragon to enter a state of near death, so that you can force a contract with it." Beiki is the best target. The land of Chunyo is too strong. The dark dragon might not be able to come back if you bring it there. Li Xing's annoyed voice rang in the live chat channel. After understanding the reason, Reinhardt's face revealed a malicious smile. The relationship between the major servers had always been competitive. As old neighbors who had lived with the original server for 3 years, they often fought with the original server in the border area. But all this while, the middle server had always been the one suppressing them in every aspect. Reinhardt was like the other European server players. He had been suppressing his anger and always wanted to return it one day. This time, it was a great opportunity for him. At this stage, the original server's combat power was average. None of the ghost commanders could compete with Demigod. Hacker was enough to deal with all of Beiki's combat power. Thinking of this, Reinhardt looked at Hacker, who was leaping over, and said, "Stop." Hacker's face showed a look of relief. Although he was not tired, he slumped on the ground in relief. He looked at Reinhardt with a dispirited expression and said, "Are you done playing? But it's useless. I'll come looking for you when I get back, because if I don't eat you, I won't be able to vent my hatred. Unless the tributes are doubled." Hacker added in the end. "What are you thinking of? Continue frog jumping and head south this time." Reinhardt summoned his Earth Dragon mount and sat on it. Hacker, %@#. *@ you're insulting your future master again. Stand upside down and sprint. Our destination is the land of Beiki in the south. Kill. Then 2 figures rushed toward Beiki. At the same time, Li Xing began to gather the guild members and marched toward the direction of Beiki. Li Xing had his own reasons for attacking Beiki this time. With Hacker's strength, he would definitely be able to inflict heavy losses on the original server. When that happened, the original server definitely wouldn't be able to stop them from taking away the dying Hacker. This was also the reason why Li Xing had chosen the original server as his target. However, just to be on the safe side, he started contacting the guild leaders of the European server, hoping that they could take care of each other when the time came to prevent any accidents. However, what Li Xing didn't expect was that the guild leaders of the major guilds would have such a strong reaction. They all expressed that they wanted to use this opportunity to suppress the original server. Therefore, the major guilds of the European server also began to gather their guild members and prepared to set off for Beiki. Beiki, the Mansion of the Dead. At this time, the major guilds of the Mansion of the Dead were also hurriedly gathering their members and preparing for war. Since the 2 regions were connected, many original players often went to the land of Tsangshu. Therefore, they naturally received the news that the major guilds of the European server were gathering their members to head south. In response, the major guilds of the original server immediately prepared for battle. However, what puzzled the original players was where the courage of the European server came from to provoke them. This courage of striking a rock with an egg was laughable to the original players. After all, the overall strength of the 2 servers was different. At this stage, their combat power was not on the same level at all. At this time, the original players only knew that the European players were preparing to attack the Mansion of the Dead from the players in the land of Tsangshu. However, they didn't know about the Abyss Dragon Hacker. They thought that the European players were out of their minds and were courting death. Regarding this, the original players were extremely calm and prepared to teach the European server a lesson. To let them know that their father would always be their father. Just as the players were quickly gathering inside and outside the Mansion of the Dead, 2 figures crossed the border and quickly approached the Mansion of the Dead. Although he was crawling upside down, Hacker's speed was not inferior to Reinhardt's, who was riding a mount, by relying on his strong physical strength. "Despicable fellow, what are you trying to do this time? Your future master wants to bring you to slaughter the city." "Really?" Hacker was confused. He didn't believe that Reinhardt would let him go to battle. Moreover, he had a bad feeling about this. Reinhardt didn't answer. Instead, he raised his spear and shouted excitedly, Kill! Hacker, who couldn't resist the order, could only continue to run upside down. As he moved forward, he left a trail of smoke behind him. As time passed, the outline of a city appeared in Hacker's sight after he had moved forward for a while. At this time, Reinhardt said to Hacker, "Do you see the city in front? Kill your way in and destroy it." Upon hearing this, the uneasiness on Hacker's face finally faded. His expression gradually turned ferocious as he felt that he was finally getting down to business. As for the strength of the city's defenses, Hacker wasn't worried at all. As a creature of the underworld, Hacker had always believed that the forces in the suburbs were weak. A demigod like him would be able to deal with them easily. As for the reason, it was very simple. It was because he knew that godly state experts couldn't live in the city. After reaching the godly state, they would choose to live in seclusion and wouldn't come into contact with the secular forces. Furthermore, the underworld dragon tribe rarely lost every time they attacked. All the summoners would only pay a huge price to summon the underworld dragon when they were sure that the underworld dragon they summoned could defeat their opponents. Otherwise, no one would do something that was bound to make a loss. As for summoning the underworld dragon to intentionally send it to its death just to obtain its body, that was even more impossible. This was because when the ancient underworld dragon king swore an oath to the 6 paths of reincarnation, he had stipulated that the total price of spiritual materials as tribute would definitely be higher than the value of the summoned underworld dragon's body. If they paid a huge price just to kill the underworld dragon and obtain its body, it would be a very unprofitable transaction. More importantly, even if the underworld dragon died, under the supervision of the 6 paths of reincarnation, the spiritual materials as tribute would still belong to the underworld dragon tribe. The summoner wouldn't be able to take back the spiritual materials just because the underworld dragon was dead. Therefore, under the combination of various factors, it was impossible for any force to summon the underworld dragon with ill intentions. This was because the one doing so would be themselves, not the summoned underworld dragon. This was also the reason why the underworld dragon tribe could accept the tribute calmly and agree to be summoned. However, Hacker seemed to be taking it for granted at this moment. What the forces in the underworld thought was completely different from what the players thought. Those who acted according to the rules were not worthy of being called players. This was because Reinhardt wanted Hacker to die this time, causing him to be on the brink of death under the concentrated fire of the Bakey players. As for the cost of the materials, this batch of materials was meant to be exchanged for this underworld dragon. It was impossible to make a loss because as long as the taming was successful, this underworld dragon would be immortal and could be used repeatedly. How could it be a loss? Although the total cost of the summoning materials was more expensive than an underworld dragon, it was definitely not more expensive than an underworld dragon that could resurrect infinitely. At this time, the players standing on the gate of the Mansion of the Dead had also noticed a huge figure approaching from the north. However, what shocked the players in the Mansion of the Dead was that this creature's way of advancing was really unconventional. Crawling upside down. Who taught you this in the European server? At this time, Lu Chai, who was standing on the gate, looked at the approaching Hacker with a smile on his face. He could not help but laugh out loud. At this time, Yi Chen, who was standing beside Lu Chai, activated his eagle eye mode. His eyes were burning with flames, and the scenery in the distance instantly became clear. Pay attention, the person next to this creature is Reinhardt from the European server. Hearing these words, the expressions of the players on the city gates froze. As the number 1 tank in the European server, they had heard of Reinhardt's name. When the conflict broke out between them and the European server in Bakey to fight for the right to kill Golden Glory, Reinhardt had displayed an extremely strong team combat ability. At that time, he separated Little Pomelo and Murphy with just 1 skill and successfully killed Murphy. It had truly shocked many players. Therefore, when they heard that the person approaching was Reinhardt, they immediately became serious. He's very strong, but no matter how strong he is, he can't compete with us. Let me shoot him down." As he spoke, the blue bracelet on Yi Chen's wrist began to glow and slowly transformed into a blue longbow formed by energy. As he pulled the bowstring, an energy arrow was formed. Seeing this scene, Lu Chai, Yi Shuer, and the others at the side looked helpless. There was only one thought in their mind. What a fool! They had a deep understanding of Yi Chen's shooting skills. Compared to him, close combat was more reliable. Just as they thought, the arrow missed its mark. Boom! At this time, the ground shook and a huge pit appeared where the arrow landed. Lu Chai asked, "Is it a critical hit?" "Yes, a critical hit of 29 times damage. It's a pity that it didn't hit Reinhardt. Otherwise it could have been killed instantly," Yi Chen said with a look of pity. Although the attack did not hit Reinhardt, it gave him a shock. He immediately slowed down and hid behind Hacker. Hacker's expression was as usual because such an attack was nothing to him. As they got closer to the mansion of the dead, Hacker's expression became more and more excited. In the Hell region, although the Nether Dragon clan was strong, they did not dare to kill to their heart's content. This was because there were many strong clans in the Hell region, and there were many forces that they did not dare to offend. However, Hacker felt that this was an opportunity. At the thought of destruction, Hacker's dragon blood boiled. He could not wait to wreak havoc. At this time, Yi Chen, who was standing on the mansion of the Dead's Gate, drew his bow for the second time and squinted at Hacker. However, he did not shoot this arrow. Instead, he waited for Hacker to step into the analysis range before opening the analysis panel to check the details of Hacker's panel. However, after seeing Hacker's analysis panel, the smile on Yi Chen's face froze. "Demigod? Brother, shoot! What are you waiting for?" At this time, Yi Shuer looked at Yi Chen with dissatisfaction. F***ck, run! This bastard brought a demigod creature. Hearing Yi Chen's angry roar, the smile on Lu Chai and the others' faces froze. Demigod? Where did the European server come from? At this time, Reinhardt's angry roar came from afar. He raised the spear in his hand high and pointed it at the mansion of the Dead's Gate. "Hacker, ram your way in!" Roar. Along with a dragon's roar, Hacker put down his hind legs that were hanging in the air with a ferocious look on his face. Then, using the ground as a springboard, he slammed into the city gate. What the F***ck? Seeing this, Lu Chai and the others decisively chose to jump off the city gate. Boom! With a loud noise, the city gate began to collapse and debris flew everywhere. At this moment, Lu Chai and the others cursed in their hearts. Chapter 650. Actually, before the arrival of the European server players, the Baiki players had already considered where the European server's confidence came from. However, they never expected the European server to have a demigod-level creature. It could be said that Hacker's appearance caught all the players off guard. After Hacker smashed the city gate, the well-prepared players in the city acted decisively even though they were surprised. Countless spells surged toward Hacker. However, Hacker stood up straight and let out a dragon roar. The roar was deafening, distorting and dissipating most of the spells. The spells that missed the surface of his body did not cause him any harm. At this moment, Hacker's destruction began. Starting from the north gate, he ran forward with all his might. His ferocious face was filled with arrogance. At this moment, Hacker felt like a ferocious tiger entering a pen of sheep. There were lambs all around him that he could slaughter at will. He stomped a bunch of them to death with his left foot, stomped a bunch of them to death with his right foot, and destroyed some buildings along the way. At this moment, Hacker was killing from the north gate to the south like a bulldozer. Seeing this scene, countless original server players felt like vomiting blood. The grandson next door actually had such a big move to mess with them. They must take revenge, they must take revenge. At this moment, the crowd was riled up. The players began to attack the arrogant Hacker with all their means. At the same time, Reinhardt, who was outside the city gate, started recording. He felt that he had to post the scene of the European server destroying the main city on the forum so that the players from the other servers could see the power of the European server. The European server players who saw this scene through the live broadcast on the forum cheered and expressed their desire to go to Bakey to see this spectacular scene with their own eyes. At this moment, the lineup of the European server players heading to Bakey gradually expanded from the initial big guilds to the entire European server. Countless European server players hurried out of Hidden Dragon City and headed south toward Bakey. Seeing so many people responding, Li Xing, the initiator of the attack on Bakey, suddenly had a crazy idea. Why don't I just kill all the Bakey players and give them a thorough cleansing? Thinking of this, Li Xing became excited. As a veteran player who had played many games and organized countless guild battles, Li Xing had never been so excited before. He was sure that this would be the biggest battle he had ever organized. Out of all the opponents he had defeated, the Bakey players would be the ones he was most proud of. At the thought of this, Li Xing immediately posted on the European server's forum, calling all the European server players to unite and teach the arrogant original server a lesson. Faced with an excellent opportunity, a large number of players in the European server responded to the call and headed to the border of the big regions, where Li Xing was, ready to do something big. As time passed, the border region of the European server was crowded with more and more people. Brothers, it's time to let the original server know who the boss is. Today's battle will definitely become a legendary moment in the history of the European server's conquest. You'll be honored to be a part of this legendary story. Charge! Li Xing's voice rang in the live chat channel. At this moment, countless European server players responded with excitement. Then, the entire army advanced toward the direction of Bakey. Meanwhile, Hacker was still wreaking havoc in Hell City. However, it wasn't as unstoppable as before. As Ao Jian, Qi Ming, and the other wall players rushed back to the Mansion of the Dead, their tacit cooperation made Hacker suffer. However, this did not stop Hacker's destruction. 10,000 swords! At this moment, Ao Jian, who had been preparing for a long time, floated into the air. The 9 spiritual swords behind his back transformed into 18 swords, then 32 swords. Finally, the sky was densely packed with spiritual swords. As Ao Jian stretched out his hand and pointed at Hacker, the spiritual swords in the sky were summoned and fell toward Hacker like raindrops. However, these spiritual swords could not penetrate any further after piercing Hacker's skin. No matter how Ao Jian manipulated them, it was useless. At this moment, a disdainful smile appeared on Hacker's face. He tensed his body and the spiritual swords that were stuck on the surface of his body shattered one by one, turning into spiritual light rain and falling down. Then, he opened his mouth and roared at Ao Jian. Suddenly, a huge sound wave turned into a ball and crashed toward Ao Jian. Ao Jian immediately wanted to dodge sideways, but the ball was flying so fast that he was hit before he could dodge. His health bar was instantly emptied, and his body turned into a black fog in the air. Seeing that Ao Jian was killed in an instant, the players did not dare to stop even though they were shocked. They continued to attack Hacker. It was death, after all. One would get used to it. The most important thing now was to kill this demigod creature and take revenge on the European server. However, what made the original server players feel hopeless was, Hacker was more of a meat shield than a meat shield. Their attacks could not break through Hacker's defense at all. Even if a few hangers worked together to create wounds on his body, these wounds would heal in the blink of an eye. The Netherworld Dragon's strongest advantage in physical strength was vividly displayed at this moment. In the face of such a powerful Hacker, the original server players were helpless. They could only continue to attack, hoping that Hacker's energy would run out and he would collapse. After all, in a game like Battle, the principle of conservation of energy was also applicable. Although Hacker could continuously repair his physical injuries, it would inevitably consume some kind of energy in his body. Therefore, the players believed that as long as they persevered in their attacks, Hacker would be finished sooner or later. However, as time passed, the players gradually changed their opinion. This was because Hacker did not show any signs of fatigue. Instead, he became more and more courageous. He kicked the buildings with his left hand and stepped on the players with his right. He had the attitude of a bully entering a city. He was very arrogant. Under such circumstances, a voice suddenly sounded in the live chat channel. "Brothers, I think it's time for me to make a move. Should we teach him a bloody lesson?" Hearing the familiar voice, the players in the Mansion of the Dead could not help but be stunned. Then, they shouted in unison, "Scram!" The players decisively chose to reject Niefeng's suggestion. What a joke! If they were in the outside world, they would definitely agree. However, they were in the Mansion of the Dead, their own home. No matter how much Hacker destroyed, he could only destroy an area. If Niefeng were to make a move, the Mansion of the Dead would be destroyed again. Therefore, they would definitely not agree to such an unreasonable request. Seeing that there was no support from the players, Niefeng could only give up. After all, his ultimate skill required the players to provide spiritual materials. Otherwise, he would not be able to afford it with his own strength. Thinking of this, Niefeng turned to look at Hu He beside him and said, "Great Demon King, go, kill him!" Hu He, who was standing beside Niefeng, reached out and patted the corpse soul bag, summoning two puppets from within. One of them had red skin and well-proportioned muscles. Although it was just standing there in a daze, it gave off the feeling that it could transform into a bloodthirsty tiger at any time. The other one was dressed in a gorgeous white robe. It had an old face and a decaying aura. It stood there like a withered tree. They were Drought Demon's zombie spirit and Yuanshu's zombie spirit. Both of them had reached the beginner Ghost Emperor level. With a glance from Hu He, the two zombie spirits suddenly disappeared from where they were and appeared in front of Hacker. Each of them grabbed one of Hacker's legs and flipped him to the ground. Looking at the north district of the Mansion of the Dead that he had not been back for a long time, Hu He's face showed a hint of helplessness. In fact, the European server had treated him well. However, in terms of standpoint, he had always been on the side of the original server. Most importantly, the European server had initiated the invasion this time. Therefore, he felt that he was not being ungrateful by taking action. After all, they had come to his house. Seeing that Hacker had been flipped to the ground, cheers rang out in the live chat channel. However, before the cheers subsided, Hacker, who had fallen to the ground, suddenly turned his head and bit Drought Demon's zombie spirit. Seeing this, Hu He's heart tightened. He immediately manipulated Drought Demon's zombie spirit to resist. Although Drought Demon's zombie spirit had the strength of an beginner Ghost Emperor, it was still difficult for it to resist Hacker, whose strength was more than one level higher. At this moment its body was bitten into two. It turned into a black fog and floated towards his zombie spirit bag. On the other side, Yuanshu's zombie spirit was constantly waving its hands and making seals in an attempt to hurt Hacker. However, although Yuanshu's attacks could cause Hacker pain, they could not break through his strong skin defense. At this moment, Hacker opened his huge mouth and spat out a ray of black death light. Yuanshu's zombie spirit could not withstand it and turned into a black fog and dissipated. Roar! At this moment, Hacker raised his head and let out an excited roar. This was a feeling of invincibility that he had never experienced in the land of Naraka. It was truly exhilarating. Exhilarating. As Hacker's destruction continued, the original server players were completely enraged. However, at this moment, other than thinking about how to take revenge in the future, there was no way to stop Hacker's destruction. At this moment, in the Soul Prayer Wine shareholder group chat, Mo Xiaoxin was raising funds. Mo Xiaoxin: "Dear bosses, I still have 2 boxes of Soul Prayer Wine. Whether we succeed or not depends on this moment. Are you willing to bet?" Lu Chai: "Bet." Gu Yu: "Bet." Seeing that the bosses in the chat channel had agreed to his proposal, Mo Xiaoxin's face smiled. Although he was known as a contrarian, his love for the Mansion of the Dead was no less than any other player. The setbacks in reality had made him treat this game as a new world that belonged to him, and the Mansion of the Dead was his home here. Therefore, seeing the Mansion of the Dead being destroyed, he was filled with anger. After some thought, he thought of an idea. It was the demonic god who was still lying in the Mansion of the Dead. Back then, the demonic god's soul was damaged and he had lost consciousness. That was why he was lying in the city. Coincidentally, he had the soul prayer wine that could repair souls. However, since this batch of soul prayer wine did not belong to him alone, he chose to ask the bosses in the group who had shares in it. After getting a positive answer, Mo Xiaoxin had no more worries and immediately ran to the south district of the Mansion of the Dead where the demonic god was. When Mo Xiaoxin reached the area where the demonic god was, he found that Gu Yu and the others were already waiting for him. "Let's work together and wake the demonic god up," Gu Yu said. Mo Xiaoxin nodded immediately and took out 2 boxes of soul prayer wine from the channel. Then, everyone worked together and climbed onto the demonic god's body. They arrived at the demonic god's head and poured the soul prayer wine into the demonic god's mouth. North District of the Mansion of the Dead. Hacker looked at the ants that were constantly attacking him with a mocking expression. As he moved forward, he spat out a black beam of light from time to time, wiping out a large area. Invincible, is this what it feels like to be invincible? It's 2F** King Wonderful! Roar! Hacker could not help but raise his head and let out a dragon's roar. I'm invincible! How? At this moment, Hacker suddenly felt his head sink. He could only feel a huge force pressing down on his head. His vision spun as his head was forcefully pressed onto the ground. This huge force was still increasing, and even if Hacker used all his strength, he could not resist it. At this moment, Hacker was terrified. He quickly closed his eyes and activated his senses. Suddenly, an incomparably huge giant appeared in his mind. When he saw the divine seal on the giant's forehead, Hacker was stunned. "Mother, I want to go home." Chapter 651. When he saw the god's seal on the demonic god's head, Hacker was terrified. At this moment, he did not even have the thought of resisting. There were many powerful races in hell, so there were many taboos that could not be violated. For example, one could not step into the territory of certain gods, and one could not destroy the formations set up by certain gods. However, what left the deepest impression on Hacker was a taboo left behind by the ancient underworld Dragon King. This taboo described a god's seal. This god's seal was formed by a burning, blood-red eye. According to the ancient underworld Dragon King, this god's seal was a taboo for all races in hell. Even the races of the ancient gods could not avoid it. This was because this god's seal symbolized the supreme power and authority of hell. There were many legends about this god's seal, but because it had been so long, no one could explain the exact reason. However, this rule of not violating this god's seal had been passed down in every race in hell until today. Hacker had unlocked the inherited memories of his ancestors when he was growing up, so he had come into contact with this information. Although he had never seen this god's seal with his own eyes, his ancestors' fear and respect for this god's seal had been passed down. This was an intuitive feeling, and as the inheritor, Hacker could clearly feel the meaning of this emotion. Therefore, when he saw the god's seal on the demonic god's forehead, Hacker was shocked. At this moment, Hacker wanted to die. He knew that he had made a huge mistake. It was clearly stated in the inheritance that the god who possessed this god's seal must not be offended, no matter who the owner was. If this taboo was violated, it would bring about the extinction of his race. It was unavoidable. This was because this was a taboo that even the ancient gods did not dare to violate. In fact, if the other party was only an ancient god, Hacker would not be so frightened. After all, the ancient underworld Dragon King was about to enter the ancient god realm. Even if he could not defeat the god, he could still fight. At this moment, thinking that he had violated the biggest taboo in his race and offended the god who possessed the burning blood eye seal, Hacker felt that he was going to have a heart attack. Dead, dead! Hacker wailed in his heart. The scene of his entire race being massacred because of his mistake appeared in his mind. The more he thought about it, the more afraid he became. Hacker's tense body gradually relaxed, and he completely gave up resisting. His face was ashen. Mom doesn't need to prepare dinner for me. I'm afraid I won't have any. Perhaps, after I die, all of you will disappear with me. Hakka's heart was filled with despair at this thought. It was said that the other regions were weak and unworthy of competing with the infernal realm. But why is it that I've never seen the greatest taboo in the infernal realm, yet I saw it the first time I left the infernal realm? Boo-hoo, it's a lie, it's all a lie, the outside world is too scary. Seeing the demonic god, the original server players who were on the verge of breaking down gradually became arrogant. The live chat channel was flooded with messages. The European server has reinforcements, so do we. Let's see whose reinforcements are stronger, ow. Just because you're a demigod you think you're awesome? Do you see that evil god? Ours. Initially, I wanted to keep a low profile, but I didn't expect the European server to be so insatiable. Now, we're going to lay our cards on the table and stop pretending. That's right, we have a divine realm master. Your father will always be your father. He will also be the father of the European server when it comes to finding external help. At this moment, the original server players were clamoring in the live chat channel. Their previous frustration was nowhere to be seen. Looking at the demonic god who had pinned Hakka to the ground, the original server players could not help but cheer. Back then, in order to save the demonic god, the original server players had risked their lives and dragged the demonic god back to Bakey bit by bit with great difficulty. It could be said that they had expended a lot of energy. At that time, the major guilds were mainly concerned about Gu Yu's reputation. But at this moment, all the players felt that it was worth it. Seeing the demonic god single-handedly suppress the demonic god who had rendered them helpless, the players could only use one word to describe their feelings: awesome. Since the demonic god had awakened and decided to take action, the original server players felt that Hakka could not stir up any more trouble. After all, the demonic god was a divine realm master, one level higher than the demigod Hakka. At this moment, the demonic god who was pressing Hakka's head with one hand turned to look at Gu Yu and the others in the distance. He said, "What are you going to do with this little worm? Demonic god boss, don't kill it yet. Beat it until it kneels and begs for mercy. We can't let it go so easily." Gu Yu and the others replied loudly, afraid that the demonic god could not hear them. The demonic god smiled ferociously and nodded. Then, he lifted Hakka up like a little chick. "I beg for mercy, I beg for mercy. Mighty God, please forgive my offense." Hearing that Gu Yu and the others wanted to beat it until it kneeled and begged for mercy, Hakka decisively begged for mercy. He did not want to miss any chance of survival. If it was not for the fact that he could not kneel, he would have knelt down first. Living in the land of Naraka, Hakka's rule of survival was that compared to life, dignity was something that could be abandoned at any time. It was not even worth mentioning. In Hakka's opinion, the demonic god in front of him was even more terrifying than the ancient gods. If he could beg for mercy, so what if he knelt down? He could even kowtow. However, the demonic god did not respond to Hakka's begging. At the same time, the demonic god's eyes were ablaze. He raised his fist and punched Hakka's face. Suddenly, Hakka's body flew backward and crashed onto the ground. This time, the defense that Hakka was so proud of was no longer effective. Faced with the demonic god's punch, Hakka only felt a burning pain on his cheek. At the same time, a strange force seeped into his body from the spot where the punch had landed. Suddenly, negative emotions began to grow in his mind. Hakka tried to dispel the negative emotions, but no matter what he did, he could not do it. At this time, The demonic god approached him with large strides and punched his head so hard that Haka thought his soul was going to leave his body. At this time, the demonic god's second punch, third punch, and fourth punch came one after another. Although the demonic god did not use any Naraka spells and only used his physical strength, it was still not something that Haka could withstand. Under the constant attack of the negative emotions, Haka's body and mind were both ravaged. At this moment, his consciousness became hazy. At this moment, he recalled his childhood experiences of being bullied by his peers, being scolded by his parents, and even accidentally entering the realm of the gods and almost losing his life. Facing the demonic god, Haka was already terrified. Now, under the torture of the negative emotions, he finally broke down and cried loudly on the ground. Witnessing this scene, the expressions of the surrounding original server players were very excited. Crying? How embarrassing! Where's the arrogance of being invincible just now? However, the original server players did not feel the slightest bit of sympathy for him. After all, the North District of the Mansion of the Dead had been destroyed to this extent, and Haka was the main culprit. The demonic god had even less sympathy for him. His heavy punches continued to land, leaving Haka with a swollen face and a bloody nose. His cries became louder and louder until they were deafening. At the northern border of Baki, after the army of European server players had assembled, they marched toward Baki in high spirits. Previously, they had seen the scene of Abyss Dragon Haka successfully invading the Mansion of the Dead and wreaking havoc on the city from Reinhardt's live broadcast. At this moment, all the European server players were extremely excited. After 3 years of battle, they had always been suppressed by the original server. Now that they saw their players getting beaten up, it was a great feeling. Their trip to Baki this time was to take advantage of this opportunity to wipe out Baki, kill all the original server players, and achieve a glorious achievement of massacring a city across regions. In the eyes of the European server players, this would definitely become a legendary milestone in the history of the European servers battle. As for the participants, they would also receive glory that the latecomers did not have. Therefore, almost all the players in the European server responded to Li Xing's call and participated in this mobilization. As time passed, they were getting closer and closer to the Mansion of the Dead. From Reinhardt's live broadcast, they saw that the Mansion of the Dead's North District was in a mess. They could not help but smile. It was definitely a delightful thing to see one's opponent suffer a loss. However, the live broadcast was soon interrupted. Regarding this, Li Xing immediately contacted Reinhardt and asked him what was going on. Reinhardt, on the other hand, said that with many original server players rushing back from outside, the city gate was very unsafe. He had no choice but to retreat alone, or else he would be in danger. After hearing Reinhardt's reply, Li Xing immediately informed all the European server players through the regional live chat channel. However, even without Reinhardt's live broadcast, the European server players were still full of confidence. With Hacker, a demigod-level netherworld dragon, there was nothing for the European server to fear. Even the strongest original server would be suppressed this time, with no chance of turning the tables. Filled with excitement, the European server army sped up their advance, pointing their swords at the Mansion of the Dead. As they advanced, the silhouette of the Mansion of the Dead appeared in the vision of the European server players. As they continued to advance, they saw the Mansion of the Dead that had already been destroyed. At this moment, cheers rang out in the European server's live chat channel. Every one of them seemed very excited, wishing that they could kill their way in and teach the arrogant original server players a lesson. However, just as the huge European server army approached the city gate, a black shadow was suddenly thrown out of the city, and the figure landed heavily on the ground. Following that, the European server players heard a deafening wail. After seeing the figure clearly, the smile on Li Xing's face, who was at the forefront of the European server army, froze, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. This was because the figure turned out to be Hacker, who was their reliance in attacking the mansion of the dead this time. Although he was puzzled as to why Hacker was thrown out of the city, Li Xing was clear that this attack seemed to have encountered some obstacles. However, his doubts were quickly answered. An incomparably huge figure came out of the city, crossed the city gate, and arrived in front of the European server army. Following that, the figure lifted Hacker from the ground like a chick, and slammed him onto the ground. Li Xing was shocked. He immediately opened the analysis menu and began to observe the attributes of the giant. When he saw the words Divine Realm behind the name, Li Xing was stunned on the spot. Retreat. Retreat quickly, we're not fighting anymore. Without hesitation, Li Xing decisively gave the order to retreat. At this moment, the European server players were dumbfounded. They could not understand what was wrong with Li Xing. However, when they saw Li Xing's detailed analysis of the demonic god in the regional chat channel, they began to run back without hesitation. F***CKU. How can we fight like this? Chapter 652. After seeing the demonic god's analysis menu, the European server's players lost all their pride. At this moment, they were worried that they would be massacred instead, let alone massacring the city. After all, the combat power of the entire European server combined could hardly fight against a demigod, not to mention a deity like the demonic god who had condensed a god's seal. Therefore, without hesitation, the entire European server army began to retreat. The players took large strides and fled in panic. At this moment, the live chat channel was discussing how to defend against the original server's attack. Based on their understanding of the original server, this kind of humiliation was something that the server could not tolerate. They would definitely seek revenge. According to what Li Xing had said, as long as they succeeded this time, the original server would not be able to take revenge. This was because they would have a demigod abyss dragon that the original server could not fight against. As for whether the original server would choose to let the Bomberman attack their main city, Li Xing expressed that there was no need to worry. Other forces might not know the advantages of the original server, but how could they not? As long as they fought and killed the Bomberman first, they would not give him a chance to use his ultimate skill. After considering everything carefully, Li Xing believed that with the Abyss Dragon Hacker, they would be invincible for a long time to come. However, seeing Hacker being beaten up by the demonic god, the European server players were already worried about the original server's revenge. Obviously, since they dared to massacre the city, what awaited them would be the original server's massacre of Hidden Dragon City. At this moment, many European server players wanted to cry but had no tears. Before coming, many of them had even recorded the entire process of the massacre at the Mansion of the Dead and saved the video to show off in front of the new players. However, they did not expect that they would be worried about the safety of their main city even before they entered the city. The development of the situation was so fast that the European server players were caught off guard. It was as if the process of showing off had been slapped in the face, just as it was about to be completed. It was so King uncomfortable. At this moment, in front of the Mansion of the Dead, Hacker was lying on the ground, barely breathing. At this moment, he felt that he was going to die, and there was no hope of survival. He was no match for the demonic god. Putting aside the fact that resistance was futile, even if he had the ability to resist, he would not dare to. This was because the demonic god's divine seal represented the greatest taboo in the great underworld. He didn't dare to violate it for fear of harming his entire race. At that moment, the dying Hacker raised his head and looked pleadingly at the demonic god. "Just kill me. Can you not kill my people?" Hacker knew that he had violated a taboo and would not be able to escape death. However, at this moment, he only hoped that the demonic god would not implicate his race, because there were still many people on the Black Dragon Peak that he valued greatly. For example, parents and siblings. Upon hearing this, the demonic god showed a look of disdain, but he did not reply. That was because he wasn't in the mood to go to other regions and kill their entire families. He was just too bored. However, the disdain on the demonic god's face made Hacker even more frightened. He thought that the demonic god had rejected his request and was really going to kill his entire family. At this moment, Gu Yu and the others walked out of the city gate one after another. How do you plan to deal with it? Should I refine it into a blood core? Just then, the demonic god's body shrunk, and in the blink of an eye, he was only 5 meters tall. He then turned his head to look at Gu Yu and the others. If we kill it, we can level up many times. Kill it! Gozi shouted right away. Stupid! Brother Gozi, you can't kill it! Mo Xiaoxin subconsciously called out the nickname he had for Gozi. Fortunately, he stopped halfway through the first word and avoided a tragic car accident. Why can't we kill it? Are we supposed to worship it? Gozi asked Mo Xiaoxin with a puzzled look on his face. Gu Yu and the others also looked at Mo Xiaoxin, wanting to know what he was thinking. This is what I'm thinking. Right now, the European server players must be very afraid that we will attack the land of Tsangshu and slaughter their hidden dragon city. Nonsense, of course they're afraid because we will indeed slaughter the entire city later. Moreover, we must kill so many of them that they won't dare to come online. At the very least, we will wait in the land of Tsangshu for 3 days, so that they won't be able to fight for 3 days. Gozi said arrogantly. Yes, now many players in the outer sea are also rushing back. This time, after we gather our men, we must destroy their hidden dragon city. Gu Yu nodded and said, expressing his agreement with Gozi's idea. Listen to me first. This is what I'm thinking. Right now, the European server players must be very worried about our arrival. At this time, if we don't kill our way into the land of Tsangshu and ask for compensation instead, do you think they will agree? Seeing that everyone was deep in thought, Mo Xiaoxin continued. Compared to the main city being destroyed, compensation is definitely more acceptable to them. Moreover, if we ask for compensation instead, not only can we make up for our losses, we can also ask for a huge sum of compensation. In this way, not only will we not suffer any losses, but we can also make a huge profit while the European server suffers losses. Good idea. Right now, someone has to compensate for the losses in the city. It's best to let the European server pay for it. Yes, that's what I'm thinking. In short, let the European server make up for the damage in the city and the casualties. Then, we can take the opportunity to extort money from them. In short, let them pay for everything. We must make them feel bad. This is the price they have to pay for this. Mo Xiaoxin continued. Hearing this, Gu Yu and the others were stunned. Then, a smile appeared on their faces. Thinking about it carefully, Mo Xiaoxin's idea was actually better than slaughtering the entire city. After all, if they slaughtered the entire city in the land of Tsangshu, no one would be responsible for the losses in the city. Thinking about this, Gu Yu said decisively, "All right, I'll contact Li Xing from the European server and see what they think. If they don't agree, then we'll fight." At this time, the dog pointed at the dying hacker and asked Mo Xiaoxin curiously, "What about it? Do you want to exchange it for compensation?" "That's right. This dragon has the strength of a demigod. Moreover, it's a demigod master controlled by the European server. It's very valuable. This will also be a bargaining chip for us to negotiate with the European server. In short, we'll raise the compensation and make them bleed." Mo Xiaoxin replied with a smile. At this moment, everyone present could not help but laugh. At the same time, Reinhardt, who was hiding in the distance and looking at the entrance of the mansion of the dead, felt his heart bleeding. Seeing Hacker on his last breath, he knew that his plan had failed. The whole process could be said to have gone for wool and come home shorn. Not only did he not get the mount, but he also lost all the materials he prepared to summon Hacker. Now, he was even about to face the revenge of the original server. It could be said that he had suffered a huge loss. At this moment, looking at Hacker, who was on the verge of death and could already sign a contract, Reinhardt was depressed. This was the best time for him to sign a contract. However, it was not the European server army that was controlling Hacker, but the original server. He did not dare to step forward at all. This was because the original server players would definitely not be courteous to him. With so many wall cheaters present, he would not be able to hold on for long no matter how strong he was. However, Reinhardt was very unwilling to leave just like that. He could only lie in the haystack and look at Hacker, who was on the verge of death, hoping that a miracle would happen. However, as time passed, Reinhardt did not get a miracle. Instead, he got a bill from Li Xing. Looking at the Netherworld dragon marked on the bill and the long string of zeros behind it, Reinhardt was dumbfounded. Where the F***ck do I get so many soul coins to buy a dragon? Can't I buy it on credit? Chapter 653. He came and left in a hurry. The siege that the European server players thought was bound to win came to an end with the appearance of the demonic god. What awaited the European server players was the revenge of the original server players. At this moment, the European server players were extremely worried. They no longer went out to carry bricks but hid in the main city, waiting for the arrival of the original army. At this time, Li Xing received a message from Gu Yu, indicating that they could settle this peacefully. However, Li Xing was not surprised. Instead, he felt that there must be a conspiracy. The truth was just as he had thought. Gu Yu then stated his request for a settlement and sent a bill at the same time. It listed the losses caused by the Mansion of the Dead in this battle and required the European server to compensate. The specific meaning was that a settlement was possible, provided that all the compensation was paid in full. Li Xing felt a headache when he saw the list of compensation. At the same time, he felt extremely sullen. However, he still informed the guild masters of the European server of Gu Yu's request and discussed with them how to deal with it. At this moment, the guild masters of the European server were also extremely sullen, like Li Xing. However, they did not blame Li Xing because before they went to Beiki, Li Xing had asked them if they wanted to carry out a citywide massacre. This was also what they had agreed to, so they could not blame anyone. After some discussion, although the guild masters of the European server were helpless, they decided to choose a settlement and compensate at the same time. However, they encountered another problem when it came to collecting the compensation. The compensation was too high and all the guilds were still in the development stage. They had invested all their funds into life classes and other aspects, so they could not come up with the compensation in a short time. Under such circumstances, the guilds of the European server could only ask for help from the outside world. Li Xing was in charge of this matter. He specially opened a reward post on the European server forum, apologizing to all the European server players and explaining the problems they had encountered at this stage. After knowing the reason, many players who had a sense of belonging to Hidden Dragon City spontaneously tipped the post to prepare compensation for Li Xing. Although the compensation was high, it was not much when divided among the huge number of European server players. Soon enough, the compensation was collected. After that, Li Xing started a live broadcast and sent the compensation to Gu Yu in the form of an email to prove that he did not take a single cent of the reward and used it all as compensation. At the same time, Li Xing gathered all the guild members and pooled together a sum of money to pay for Hacker's redemption. He also sent the money to Gu Yu. Li Xing had only sent the bill to Reinhardt to scare him. As one of the most important members of his guild, Li Xing naturally wouldn't ignore him. Hence, he chose to redeem Hacker. Moreover, now that Hacker was on the verge of death, if Lionheart could form a contract with him, it would be of immense help to their guild. After Gu Yu received the compensation, he allowed Reinhardt to take Hacker away as promised. At the same time, he also stated that he would not march into the land of Tsangshu this time, but if there was a next time, he would not be forgiven. Gu Yu's ruthless words stirred up the European server again. In fact, the European server players knew very well that the damage in the original server's battle city was definitely not as high as stated on the bill. The bill must have been multiplied several times before it was sent to them. However, they were in the wrong in the first place. In order not to be massacred, the European server players could only grit their teeth and accept the blackmail from the original server. But this hatred they would remember. After that, the European server's upgrade craze began. His goal was very clear. Once he became stronger, he would defeat the normal server. To redeem himself. All of this was what Lu Wu wanted to see. Competition would allow the players to grow, and growth would also bring greater benefit. To Lu Wu, the loss in the North District of the Mansion of the Dead was nothing. The growth of the players was the key. At the same time, after experiencing the situation where the city gate was destroyed, many players in the original server also felt a sense of urgency. The desire to become stronger was just as fervent. An unexpected competition between the two servers gave Lu Wu an unexpected surprise. Contrary to the Zero Guild of the European server, Li Xing, who was collecting donations from all the players in the European server, Gu Yu, who was in the original server, also opened a thread after receiving the huge amount of compensation. Come, let's celebrate. We'll open a thread to distribute wealth. Distribute 200 million soul coins, 100 per floor, until there's no more. Poster, Invincible Loneliness content. Everyone knows the specific reason, so I won't go into details. This money doesn't belong to me anyway. After discussing with the presidents of the major guilds, we've allocated 100 million to repair the North District of the Mansion of the Dead. The rest will be distributed to everyone. First come, first serve. 2 million per floor until there's no more. This thread has an automatic reward function. Reply to receive the reward from the poster. Only Baiki Forum players are allowed to reply, and only once. Total amount of wealth. 200 million soul coins. Crayon_Shinchan. I own the first floor. Who can compete with me? Laughing emoji. Automatically rewarded 100 soul coins by the poster. Invincible Loneliness. Of course the first floor is mine, haha. Automatically rewarded 100 soul coins by the poster. Brick Moving Little Fighter. Aha, I saw the wealth distribution thread when I opened it. I'm rich and the first floor is mine. Automatically rewarded 100 soul coins by the poster. Left Pupil Little Nanny. Wow, 100 soul coins. This is the first time a newbie has encountered such a huge amount of money. Thank you, poster. Automatically rewarded 100 soul coins by the poster. Hungry_that_mate one. I snatched the first floor on the spot. Bless all the Baiki players. Automatically rewarded 100 soul coins by the poster. Little_double_leaves. Yaha, this is the first time I snatched the first floor, and it's a wealth distribution thread. I'm happy. Automatically rewarded 100 soul coins by the poster. Men should play warrior. I could smell the soul coins when I saw the poster's name. I didn't expect it to be a wealth distribution thread. I decisively snatched the first floor and collected some money. Tongguaki. JPG. Automatically rewarded 100 soul coins by the poster. At this moment, the replies to Gu Yu's post increased rapidly. It was unprecedentedly popular. In just a minute, the post had reached the top 10 most popular posts on the main page of the forum. After the wealth distribution thread was made known to the players, they continued to flood in. Although the post had 2 million wealth distribution threads, it was not worth mentioning compared to the number of Baiki players. The 200 million wealth distribution thread was collected in less than 10 minutes. At the same time, the number of threads on the post had almost reached 4 million. The players who arrived late and did not receive the wealth distribution could only sigh, feeling like they had missed a big red packet. As the party whose city gate was breached, the forum of the local server became lively. On the other hand, the forum of the European server was the complete opposite. The happier the local players were, the sadder they were. That was because the original server players were getting their money. They felt terrible about it. Netherworld, Kuelong Ocean. Just as the local server and the European server were about to fight, something big happened in the Kuelong Ocean. At the center of the Kuelong Ocean, a dragon's roar resounded throughout the entire ocean. A crimson flood dragon roared at the sky, its scales shining brightly under the sun. Below the flood dragon, two gigantic beasts were floating on the surface of the water. They looked up at the transforming flood dragon in the sky with a solemn expression. Hai Meng, what if Kuelong fails to break through? Tao Wu turned to look at the Hai Meng giant beast, who looked equally solemn. Hai Meng did not answer, but a murderous glint flashed in his eyes. When he found out that his child, little Kuan, had signed the sea hegemony contract with the Kuelong king, he was furious. In his opinion, if little Kuan really wanted to fulfill the sea hegemony contract, only death would await him. Although he was protected by the sea hegemony contract, the Kuelong king could not hurt little Kuan while he was still a minor. However, little Kuan, who had just reached adulthood, had to fight the Kuelong king. It was unavoidable, and the battle would only end when one of them died. In Hai Meng's opinion, even if little Kuan had great growth potential, how could he compete with the Kuelong king, who was about to break through to the divine state? There was no suspense in this battle. For this reason, Hai Meng and Tao Wu began to discuss how to help little Kuan survive this disaster. After some discussion, they came up with two solutions. The first solution was to kill the Kuelong king. This way, the sea hegemony contract would automatically be cancelled, and little Kuan would no longer have to fight the Kuelong king. However, this solution was not easy to achieve. Although they were both in the demigod realm, the Kuelong king was about to break through to the divine state. He could fight two enemies at once, so Tao Wu and Hai Meng had no confidence in winning. They dared not try this method unless it was their last resort. The second solution was to help the Kuelong king break through to the divine state, which could also cancel the sea hegemony contract. This was because the sea hegemony contract bound the overlord of the sea. As long as one broke through to the divine state, he would receive the instructions of the underworld sea god and head to the central sea area of the underworld. Naturally, he would no longer be the overlord of the sea area. After some hesitation, Tao Wu and Hai Meng chose the second solution. For this reason, they sent a large number of sea treasures and spiritual materials to the Kuelong king, hoping to help the Kuelong king break through to the divine state as soon as possible. More than a year had passed, and the Kuelong king did not let them down. After being stuck in the demigod realm for many years, he was about to usher in the divine state. At this time, the originally calm Kuelong Ocean was surging with waves. Lightning and thunder flashed in the sky as if a catastrophe was coming. It could be said that the entire Kuelong Ocean catered to the Kuelong king's advancement ceremony. During the transformation of the Kuelong king, the scarlet scales on the surface of his body began to fall off continuously, and mottled golden dragon scales quickly grew. This process seemed to be very painful, and the Kuelong king could not help but roar. As time passed, the newly grown scales on the surface of the Kuelong king's body also fell off. When new dragon scales grew again, there was more gold and less red. This happened again and again. After more than 30 transformations, the dragon scales on the surface of the Kuelong king's body were no longer scarlet, but light gold. However, this process was not over yet. These light gold dragon scales began to fall off again. When new dragon scales grew again, a few dragon scales that shone with dazzling golden light appeared. After 3 more transformations, the Kuelong king had turned into a golden dragon with a completely different appearance from before. However, even after witnessing this scene, Tao Wu and Hai Meng were still extremely worried. This was because the process was not over yet. The Kuelong king was about to usher in the most crucial step, the divine state. If he failed, he would not be recognized by the underworld sea god. Then, the Kuelong king would not be able to advance to the divine state within 10,000 years. Chapter 654. As time passed, the Kuelong king, who was floating in the air, suddenly lowered his head after his entire body turned golden. At the same time, a pale golden teleportation portal appeared beside him. With the appearance of the golden teleportation portal, the turbulent sea instantly calmed down. The Kuelong king did not hesitate and immediately entered the portal. Seeing this scene, Bian and Hai Meng were extremely nervous. If the Kuelong king failed to become a god, they only had one choice left. That was to kill the Kuelong king. Otherwise, little Kuan would not survive. However, there was another possibility. If they failed to kill the Kuelong king, the two of them would die in the hands of the Kuelong king. After they died, little Kuan would not be able to live. He would definitely be killed by the Kuelong king when he grew up. Then, the whole family would be together. As they waited anxiously, time seemed to be stretched infinitely. Bian and Hai Meng's bodies were tense, ready to strike. At the same time, the abnormality in the Kuelong Ocean attracted the attention of the major forces in the sea. At this moment, the major forces in the Kuelong Ocean sent people to investigate the cause of the abnormality in the sea. When they heard the news that the Kuelong king was breaking through, without any hesitation, the major forces in the Kuelong Ocean chose to stop all maritime operations and recall all personnel outside. Although the Kuelong king, the overlord of the sea, had no dealings with them, this was the critical moment for the Kuelong king to break through to the divine state. If they were disturbed by the personnel outside the sea, they would have to bear the wrath of the Kuelong king. No one dared to take this risk, including the current strongest force in the Kuelong Ocean, the Mu Te Sea nation. After the Sea King heard the news, like the major forces, he quickly issued an order for all the members of the forces outside to return to the island and not to go out to sea. It was better to be safe than sorry. Under such circumstances, even the Sea King dared not take the risk. Although he had inherited the Shadow Legion and had many very powerful demigods and even divine state warriors, these warriors could not be used at this stage. However, these warriors could only be seen at this stage and could not be used. With the current comprehensive strength of the Mu Te Sea nation, going against the Kuelong king would only result in death. Under such circumstances, the Sea King naturally chose to hide. It could be said that the entire Kuelong Ocean had undergone a huge change due to the breakthrough of the overlord of the sea, the Kuelong king. At the same time, the Kuelong king, who was the focal point of the Kuelong Ocean, appeared in the hazy 6 paths of reincarnation after passing through the space tunnel. At this moment, it had completely lost the domineering aura it had when it was in the Kuelong Ocean. It was prostrating on the ground respectfully, waiting for the moment of apotheosis. On top of his head, a dark green scroll slowly unfurled. Then, spots of dark light sprinkled down and enveloped the Kuelong king. At that moment, Kuelong king suddenly felt an unprecedented sense of exhaustion. Gradually, it could not hold on any longer. Its body gradually relaxed and fell into a coma. While the Kuelong king was unconscious, a vague figure appeared beside him and pressed his hand on his head. With the sprinkling of starlight on the underworld god list, a consciousness broke through the Kuelong king's body and pierced into his soul. It began to examine the Kuelong king from the inside out. Becoming a god was the final threshold of the netherworld realm. In reality, the great emperors of the underworld had long known that the heaven realm had made many arrangements in the dark, but they all chose to turn a blind eye to it. They also knew that some things couldn't be stopped. However, the barrier of becoming a god was their last line of defense. There must be no accident. This was because the great emperors of the underworld understood that the gods were the support of the underworld. They were also the key to the underworld's ability to retain spiritual energy. Without them, the underworld would gradually become like the human realm, a persimmon that the heaven realm could easily squash. This was also the reason why all the gods would not come into contact with the secular world after becoming a god. They had their own circle. Although that circle was still cruel, every god who was recorded on the underworld god list had a chance to start over even if they died. As long as the divine seal was not destroyed, the soul would be reforged. Being on the underworld god list meant that your name would stay on the god list forever. Even if you reincarnated, you would still be you. The power of the law would always accompany you into reincarnation. At this moment, the Kuelong king was undergoing the final test before being recorded on the underworld god list. From the moment of his birth until now, every minute, every second, and every detail was replayed in the examiner's mind. This process was very long. When the test was over, half a day had passed. At this moment, the examiner's figure slowly disappeared from this space. At the same time, the god list shone brightly. The power of the law gushed out from the god list and wrapped around the Kuelong king's body. It was also at this moment that the Kuelong king woke up. When he saw the power of the law wrapped around his body, an uncontrollable joy appeared on his face. This was because he knew that he had succeeded. He had been pardoned by the underworld sea god and obtained the opportunity to become a god. At this moment, the underworld god list slowly floated down and stood in front of the Kuelong king. Then, in the Kuelong king's eyes, a light spot lit up on the god list. As the light spot moved slowly, it outlined a glowing track. Soon, 2 glowing words were outlined. Kuelong. He had officially become a god, and his name was on the god list. In an instant, the 3,000 power of the law wrapped around his body all rushed to the underworld god list, leaving only a fiery red ribbon of the law circling around his body. It gradually shrank into his body. At this moment, the Kuelong king found that his understanding of the law of fire had increased dramatically. His control of this power was also more than 100 times better than before. While feeling happy, the Kuelong king decisively lowered his head to the god list and prostrated on the ground to express his respect. At this moment, the sea overlord contract in his mind also dissipated and was replaced by an order from the underworld sea god. Go to the central sea region. At the same time this order appeared, the surrounding space suddenly began to distort. The Kuelong king felt dizzy and then found himself in the sky above the Kuelong Ocean, which was the place he left. Boom! At this moment, the Kuelong Ocean was in an uproar. The seawater condensed into columns of water that soared into the sky and then scattered down like fireworks. At this moment, the Kuelong Ocean seemed to have its own consciousness and was celebrating the sea overlord's success in becoming a god. Roar! Kuelong also let out an excited roar at this moment. The roar shook the sky and spread throughout the Kuelong Ocean. It made all the forces in the Kuelong Ocean understand one thing: the Kuelong king had become a god. On the ground, Tao Wu and Hai Meng's faces also revealed joyful smiles. At this moment, they sincerely congratulated the Kuelong king for becoming a god. They were also glad that their child, little Kuan, had escaped death. As the water columns rose, the Kuelong king, who had already transformed into a golden dragon, turned his head and looked at the sea region that had accompanied him for many years. A trace of reluctance flashed in his eyes. However, in the end, all the emotions in his eyes turned into determination. He then turned his head and flew to the sunset. His figure gradually flew away and became more and more blurry. The golden color on the surface of his body gradually merged with the sunset. Roar! At this moment, his roar was heard again. It was as if he was bidding farewell to the sea region that had accompanied him for many years. It was also as if he was bidding farewell to his past self. With his departure, the Kuelong Ocean had turned a new page and opened a new chapter. It would also welcome a new owner in the future. Chapter 655. After the Kuelong king left, the boiling Kuelong Ocean returned to its usual tranquility. However, this was only on the surface. In reality, there were already undercurrents surging. The Kuelong King's departure meant that the Kuelong Ocean's overlord position was vacant. At this moment, a large number of marine creatures from the outer sea began to march towards the Kuelong Ocean with their subordinates. These sea beasts, whose bloodline had reached the heavenly spirit level, were extremely eager to be the overlord of the Kuelong Ocean because it was a path to becoming a god. Only the overlord of the sea region had the right to become a god. No matter how strong the other sea creatures were, it was impossible for them to become gods. This was also the reason why the descendants of every sea region overlord would choose to head to another sea region to compete with the old overlord for the position of sea region overlord. This was something they had to go through on their path of growth. If they could not become the overlord of the sea region, then the demigod realm would be their final destination. However, the position of the overlord of the sea was limited, but the number of fish and sea beasts was extremely large. Under such circumstances, competition was the only way. Of course, apart from competition, there was also a shortcut. That was to wait for the old overlord of a certain sea region to ascend to godhood or die. This way, the sea region where the old overlord resided would become an ownerless land. This was also the easiest time to seize the position of overlord of the sea region. But such opportunities were too rare. This was because every overlord of the sea region had an extremely long lifespan. It was unrealistic to wait for them to die of natural causes. As for waiting for the old overlord to ascend to godhood, this kind of opportunity was also very rare. This was because not every overlord of the sea region could successfully ascend to godhood. However, such an opportunity was born in the Kuelong Ocean at this very moment. Many sea beasts that had waited for tens of thousands of years, or even hundreds of thousands of years, smelled the scent of opportunity. After the Kuelong King left, a large number of ferocious sea beasts began to head towards the Kuelong Ocean in an attempt to fight for the position of overlord of the Kuelong Ocean. However, at this moment, Swan and Hai Meng chose to leave, returning to their respective seas, because he knew that this was going to be a place of trouble. Although they really hoped that their child, little Kuan, could obtain this sea, little Kuan was still underage. If he became the overlord of the sea with their help, then little Kuan would not be far from death. This was because after becoming the overlord of the sea, one would not be able to reject the challenges of other sea beasts. In other words, they had to sign the Oceanic War for Hegemony contract. After the contract came into effect, little Kuan had to fight the challenger one-on-one, and they could not intervene at all. At that time, they wanted to kill the Kuelong King because little Kuan was still underage and the sea hegemony contract had yet to take effect. Otherwise, with their status as the overlords of the sea, they would not be able to intervene in the sea hegemony ceremony. Now that the sea hegemony contract had disappeared with the departure of the Kuelong King, it was already a blessing for them. Not only did he avoid a battle with a powerhouse like the Kuelong King, but he also saved little Kuan's life. Therefore, they had no intention of interfering in this battle for the sea region and decisively chose to leave. At this moment, in the void ocean to the west of the Kuelong Ocean, a giant blue whale woke up from its slumber. At this moment, it sensed that the aura of the old overlord of the Kuelong Ocean in the east, Kuelong King, had dissipated. It knew very well what this meant. After being suppressed by Tao Wu for 30,000 years, it dared not dream of becoming the overlord of the void ocean. However, at this moment, it smelled the opportunity of becoming the overlord of the Kuelong Ocean. At this moment, a hint of greed appeared in its eyes. Soon after, it swung its giant tail, let out a long cry and swam towards the Kuelong Ocean. In the Jade Spring Ocean, northwest of the Kuelong Ocean, an island full of vegetation suddenly trembled at this moment. While the residents on the island were panicking, the island suddenly sank to the bottom of the water. Then, a giant head emerged from the water. Perhaps the residents on the island did not expect that the island they relied on for survival was actually the back of a snapping turtle. At this moment, as its owner woke up, everything on the island no longer existed. At this moment, like the giant blue whale, it turned its head excitedly to look at the Kuelong Ocean and then set off. In the Scarlet Ocean, northeast of the Kuelong Ocean, 3 giant 8-clawed monsters also sensed the dissipation of the Sea Dragon King's aura in the Kuelong Ocean. Then, they formed a group and headed towards the Kuelong Ocean. Countless similar situations were happening in all the major oceans. This was the moment that all the fishes and sea beasts yearned for, to be the overlord of the ocean. They did not want to miss this precious opportunity. At this moment, the Kuelong Ocean had become the battlefield where they were about to start their massacre. After the Kuelong King left, the major forces in the Kuelong Ocean had a premonition that something big was about to happen. This was a spectacular scene that many forces in the Kuelong Ocean had never seen in their entire lives. Sky spirit level sea beasts that were usually hard to see were constantly appearing in the Kuelong Ocean. Under such circumstances, the major forces in the Kuelong Ocean once again chose to stay in seclusion. These sea beasts were extremely powerful. Most of them were above the Ghost Emperor realm, and most of them were close to the threshold of demigod. Otherwise, they would not have the courage to compete for the overlord position of the ocean. It could be said that none of the major forces in the Kuelong Ocean could afford to offend them. Hence, the wisest way was to avoid them and try not to come into contact with them to prevent any accident. However, while the major forces in the Kuelong Ocean were trembling in fear, there was one force that was surprised. It was the player force that was known as the Rogue by the nearby sea area. The players who discovered the abnormality in the Kuelong Ocean were initially very curious, as they did not understand what was going on in the Kuelong Ocean. Subsequently, after communicating with the major forces in the Kuelong Ocean, they found out that the Kuelong King had been apotheosized and the battle for the overlord of the ocean was about to begin. However, the players were still extremely calm. From the players' point of view, it had nothing to do with them. We still have to fish, search for treasures at the bottom of the ocean, and do whatever we have to do. The players had no impression of what the Kuelong King looked like. His departure did not affect the players at all. Moreover, many players relied on carrying bricks at sea to earn the soul coins they needed for their daily consumption. Hence, it was impossible for them not to go out to sea. However, the players could not remain calm very soon. Seeing the appearance of a large number of heaven spirit-level fish, they could not suppress their excitement. There were many players who fished and carried bricks in the entire Bakey player community. This was because fishing was indeed a good way to earn money. Moreover, the process was very fun. The entire process was equivalent to a lucky draw. Before pulling the fish out of the water, no player would know how much the fish that was caught was worth. Catching a spiritual fish was almost equivalent to a few days' worth of harvest. As for catching a spiritual sea fish, it basically meant that one's luck had exploded. If he could catch a spiritual level fish, he would basically become rich overnight. Fish of this level were sold at a very high price in the auction house. Moreover, most of the time they were extremely rare and priceless. If one could catch one and bring it back, they would at least be able to exchange it for a set of top-notch equipment at the current stage. As for the heaven spirit level, no player had ever caught one until now. P.S. Fish's strength level is divided into fish level, normal, spirit level, sea spirit level, spiritual level, heavenly spirit level, sea spirit, lord of the sea. Hence, there was a reason why fishing was one of the popular activities of carrying brick. Even the most common fish was not without value. After the players caught it, they could sell it to the players who made the delicacies in exchange for soul coins. The entire process from fishing to selling fish had already become a complete system after 3 years of development. Every player in the circle of fishing and carrying bricks did not expect to catch a demigod sea spirit level fish. Their biggest dream was to catch a big fish of the heavenly spirit level. Even when the players in the fishing circle occasionally met at sea, they would greet each other like this. What a coincidence! Did you catch a heavenly spirit fish today? It could be said that catching a heavenly spirit level fish was the wish of every player who liked to fish. However, such high-level fish were too rare. Even some veteran players had never seen a heavenly spirit level fish after playing for 3 years. Hence, until now, catching a heavenly spirit fish was just a legend and could not become a reality. But at this moment, the opportunity had arrived. With the departure of the Kuelong King, a large number of heavenly spirit-level fishes and sea beasts wanted to compete for the opportunity to advance to the sea spirit in the Kuelong Ocean. High-quality fish that were usually hard to see by the players were increasing in number in the Kuelong Ocean. At this moment, the players and the forces in the Kuelong Ocean were in a completely different mood. They were all very excited. Then, a post appeared on the forum, igniting the passion of the players for sea fishing. I will analyze the big incident in the Kuelong Ocean. At the same time, I will point out that such a grand occasion might not be seen again in the future. So, everyone, seize the opportunity. Original poster. Crayon Shinchan content. As a seasoned fishing player, I have caught all kinds of fish, from normal fish to psychic fish. When I was at psychic level, I had an accident and was swallowed along with the boat by that fish. So, don't doubt that I have the qualifications to write a guide. Next, I will first attach the market price of each type of fish as well as the fishing guide. Normal fish, 10 market price, 1 soul coin. Spiritual fish, 1 the average market price is about 120 soul coins. However, there are a few special types of spiritual fish that are priced above 250 soul coins. For example, the blue flame tail fish that can be used to refine ice spirit pills, the radiant light fish that can be used in alchemy, and so on. The price of this type of spiritual fish is generally about double that of normal spiritual fish. Fishing guide. This type of fish can be found everywhere in the nearby waters. The shipping rate is relatively high. The coordinates of the areas where the fish are denser are as follows. The waters near Mwayage Island, the waters near Black Reef Island, the coordinates of Void Ocean 224,245. These areas are easier to ship, but this is just my personal experience. There are many other areas where the spiritual fish are denser. These 11 areas are just for your reference. Fishing tools. Spiritual fish are basically as strong as ghost soldiers, or even weaker. So, they don't need good fishing gear. The most common fishing rod in the mall that costs 10 soul coins will do. The same goes for bait. Spiritual sea fish, 1 market price, around 2,000 to 5,000. It depends on the quality of the fish. The price fluctuates quite a bit. Fishing guide. This type of fish is relatively rare. The stronger ones are already close to the Ghost Commander level. If you don't have the ability, don't consider fishing for spiritual sea fish. Of course, there are exceptions. There are a few spiritual sea fish that are very weak. They are not even as strong as normal spiritual fish, such as the AO fish. However, the recommended level is between 50 to 100. As for the specific location of the branch, I know about 2 of them. I'll share them this time. 1 Void Ocean, west of Green Radish Island, there is a school of black spirit fish. Friendly reminder, the black spirit fish here are below level 90. If you manage to fish for them, you will only be eaten, unless you have very good equipment or have teammates to help you. 2 Kuelong Ocean coordinates, 123,415. There are 2 schools of sea spirit fish here, namely steelwood fish and golden cicada fish. Recommended level, 70+. Fishing tools. Since you have the ambition to fish for spiritual sea fish, of course, you must equip yourself with good tools. I recommend you to buy a high-quality fishing rod from the mall, 300 soul coins. The bait must not be shabby. Otherwise, the spiritual sea fish will not bite the bait. Instead, they will despise you for being poor, funny. However, I have a method to make bait. I'll give it to everyone. The specific tools required are as follows: glutinous rice, fruit vanilla, green wine ball. These items are not expensive. You can buy them from the auction house. They are at least 1/3 cheaper than the bait bought from the stupid officials. However, you have to make them yourself. You can make about 5 to 10 servings in one go. Attached is a 3-minute production video. Next, it's the highlight. Psychic fish. 1. Its strength is above the ghost general realm. Some may have already reached the ghost king realm. The market price cannot be estimated because this type of fish has only appeared 3 times in the market. The first transaction was on February 21, 2320, and the price was 28,000 soul coins. The second transaction was on November 9, 2320, and the price was 29,000 soul coins. The third transaction was on September 23, 2321, which is a month ago. The price was 80,000 soul coins. The reason for such a huge fluctuation is because of the opening of the demonic chef profession. The price of ingredients has greatly increased. It can be said that the few who sold the psychic fish previously definitely suffered a loss. However, the price is relatively stable now. However, it is still very difficult to appraise it. I think it is better not to sell the psychic fish for less than 80,000 soul coins because it is too rare. Thinking about how I missed a psychic fish last time, my heart is bleeding. However, what can I do if I can't defeat it? Lowly. Fishing guide. No guide, it all depends on luck. Fishing tools. 2,000 soul coins in the shop, super fishing rod. If you are very rich and fishing purely for fun, you can ask Tongua to customize a fishing rod. The cost is more than 10,000 soul coins, laughing emoji. As for bait, you can choose the most expensive one in the shop. You can also make bait with your own spiritual materials. Of course, you can use spiritual fish as bait because the psychic fish eats fish too, laughing emoji. Divine spiritual fish. 1. The market price cannot be estimated. Until now, no player has ever caught one. However, it is said that a player from the European server managed to catch one. However, he had the same experience as me. He was swallowed along with his boat and missed a chance to get rich, laughing emoji. Fishing guide. None fishing tools. Although the super fishing rod is not a problem, it is better to ask Tongua to customize it because the super fishing rod may not be able to withstand it. Ocean spirit. 1. Do you want to catch Taowu? This is not something we can handle at this stage, laughing emoji. Fishing tools. What fishing tools? Eat your farts. The above is my summary of the plan. Next, I will talk about my opinion on the appearance of a large number of high-level fish in the Kuelong Ocean. Just like the title, this is a rare opportunity. After all, we don't know when the next sea hegemony battle will begin. Based on my understanding of this game, the flow of time will not accelerate. Perhaps your grandson's grandson won't be able to wait for such an opportunity. Therefore, you should act decisively. Since the high-level fish are too strong, it is best to form a team with them, unless you are a member of a group of cheaters, laughing emoji. As for those divine spiritual level fish that are participating in the sea hegemony battle, please bring along the entire guild's combat power to face them. Whether you can succeed or not will depend on fate, laughing emoji. One last reminder. Do you want to get rich overnight? Then go to the Kuelong Ocean and carry brick. However, this time you will be carrying bricks of gold. This is a rare opportunity. You will not get another one if you miss it. Guide author. Crayon Shin-chan. Although the players in the forum hated Crayon Shin-chan very much and could not wait to kill him as soon as possible. However, all the players would click on his post to read it. However, what surprised the players this time was that Crayon Shin-chan did not open a post to attack others. Instead, he published a guide. When the players saw the content of the post, their passion was instantly ignited. Sea fishing had always been a hobby of many players since the launch of Battle Royale. There were a variety of sea fishes and spiritual fishes in the ocean, which had always been a major category of daily consumables for the players. Compared to reality, the fishes here were more unique. Different fishes had different attributes and habits, which added a touch of magic to sea fishing. How to fish was also a major knowledge in the game. However, other than the help provided by the Mansion of the Dead's library, the players still needed to practice more on their own. This caused the newbie players who were not familiar with the technique to often fail to catch fish. The guide that Crayon Shinchan gave this time was a good introduction to many newbie players. At the same time, it also caused a discussion among the players in the forum. In the replies below, many players were no longer stingy. They shared the tips that they had mastered in fishing and the coordinates of the spiritual fishes that they could catch. Soon, this post became the #1 fishing guide post in the forum. However, the thing that attracted the players' attention the most was Crayon Shinchan's last hint, which was the major incident in the Kuelong Ocean. This time, it wasn't just the players in the sea fishing circle. Many players who did not normally fish were also intrigued. Just like what Crayon Shinchan said, if they missed this opportunity, they might regret it for the rest of their lives. Although luck was important, if one did not prepare for this opportunity, it would not come to them. Therefore, the players quickly mobilized and began to organize fishing teams and teams. There were even big guilds that had the ambition to catch the celestial spiritual fish. They were prepared to go fishing together. This was beyond Lu Wu's expectations. It was supposed to be a normal battle for supremacy in the sea, but the player's reaction was beyond his expectations. Because of Crayon Shinchan's post, the shop's fishing gear category was sold in large quantities. In just one day, Lu Wu was elated to earn so much money. At this moment, he felt that he did not misjudge Mo Xiaoxin. Back then, he had set up a cheat to collect negative emotions for him. He did not expect to be rewarded now. Lu Wu knew that there was going to be fun next. The battle for supremacy in the Kuelong Ocean was a disaster that all the major forces in the Kuelong Ocean could not avoid. However, it was about to become a carnival for the players. Chapter 656. The second day after the Kuelong king left, the entire Kuelong Ocean was divided, and the war had begun. Faced with such a situation, a large number of forces in the Kuelong Ocean could not withstand the pressure and began to flee to the outer waters, preparing to avoid being involved in the war. The nearby Void Ocean had also become a refuge for these forces. Apart from those major forces, many clans in the Kuelong Ocean began to evacuate to the Void Ocean with bags of various sizes. However, as they approached the border of the ocean, they were shocked to find that waves of players' fleets were heading their way. Out of kindness and to please the player clan, these forces that had evacuated the Kuelong Ocean immediately reminded the players of the major event that happened in the Kuelong Ocean, indicating that it was dangerous to sail in the Kuelong Ocean. The players could not help but laugh at the reminder. Because that was their goal. They continued to move forward decisively. At this moment, many clans in the Kuelong Ocean could not help but lament. A lunatic was still a lunatic. He had never changed. How King willful. In fact, the scale of the players fishing this time was unprecedentedly large. Just as Crayon Shinchan said in the forum, this was an opportunity. There was gold everywhere, and those who were prepared to fish for it would be able to earn a large sum of money. At this moment, all the players were ready to show their hands and earn a bucket of gold. After the heavenly spirit-level fishes and sea beasts gathered in the Kuelong Ocean, the entire Kuelong Ocean was divided into countless small battlefields. At this time, in the sea near Shinma Island, a battle began quietly. On one side was the heavenly spirit-level shark spiritfish, and on the other side was the heavenly spirit-level bonefish. As the two controlling parties of this area, they had to fight for the winner to advance to the center of the Kuelong Ocean. Therefore, a battle was inevitable. At this moment, the respective schools of fishes had already fought with each other, and they also began to fight for their lives. Accompanied by a roar, the two huge spiritual fishes collided with each other. As time passed, the surface of the ocean had turned red and was filled with a strong smell of blood. Listening to the roar outside, the Kuelong forces that had yet to evacuate from the nearby islands were already shivering in fear, hiding in the islands and not daring to go out. When the battle was at its peak, a fishing boat slowly sailed over. In such an intense battle, the people on the boat began to cast their hooks and fish leisurely. The forces that were watching the sea battle from the island were stunned when they saw this scene. But when they found out that it was a member of the player clan, they couldn't help but reveal an expression of, as expected. After all, they had always been convinced by the player clan's ability to court death. At this moment, the Sea King on Xinmo Island was also alarmed. He came to the edge of the island and began to observe the scene. Thus, a scene that left the Sea King dumbfounded appeared. Just as he expected, the fishing boat was smashed into the sea by a ferocious spiritual fish in a short while, and the player on the boat was devoured as well. But soon, another fishing boat came. This fishing boat was even more outrageous. It stopped at the area where the battle was the most intense. It also cast its hook and started fishing. In less than a moment, the ship was destroyed again. However, another player clan fleet soon arrived. From the Sea King's point of view, this fleet was rather excessive. The shark spirit fish was busy fighting with the barb bone fish. These fleets actually surrounded these two big fish and threw their hooks at them, as if they were about to bite the bait. At this moment, the Sea King could not help but cover his face. How idiotic must they be to come up with such an operation? They were fighting all right? It was fine if they didn't give them face, but they even threw their hooks in front of them. Who were they looking down on? As expected, this fleet was annihilated by the two enraged heavenly spirit-level marine fish. But soon, the players let these two big fish know what it meant to have an endless stream. One batch after another died, and in the end, the Sea King was speechless. At this moment, there was only one thought in his mind. Idiotic, they're pure player clansmen. In the end, the barb bone fish and the shark spirit fish couldn't take it anymore. They temporarily gave up on the battle and started slaughtering the player clan's fishing boats and warship. The bloody and cruel battle for supremacy of the sea was forcefully turned into a cooperation between the players. Batches of player clan warships and fishing boats arrived one after another, making it impossible for these two sea beasts to fight properly. This was because every time they started fighting, there would always be a new player clan ship sailing over from afar, fishing unscrupulously and challenging their dignity. The two heavenly spirit-level marine fish were also tormented internally. The Sea King and his subordinates who watched the entire process were completely numb. Regarding the idiocy of the players, they had nothing but admiration for them. After all, they knew that only the player clan dared to risk their lives for the sake of idiocy. However, what the Sea King didn't know was that such a scene was happening in every corner of the Kuelong Ocean. Although the battle for supremacy was very intense, the scene would always change whenever the players arrive. You guys can fight, we'll fish. This was the mentality of the players at this moment. Although most of the ships were destroyed, there were also successful players. They would post screenshots in the regional channel and share their joy to stimulate more players. Hence, a large number of ships set off from the Liuli coast and headed to the Kuelong Ocean. At this time, other ways to earn soul coins were not as practical as fishing in the Kuelong Ocean. Because the area was filled with spiritual fishes, it was simply a gold mine full of temptation. At this time, not only were the Baiki players going crazy, even the neighboring European server was the same. Seeing that the players from the original server were going to the Kuelong Ocean to pick up money, they were also envious. One after another, they expressed that they wanted to go too and began to organize their manpower. Many rare fish species that once required a few days or even a few months to catch were now at their fingertip. Although there were risks, the risk of death was not a threat to the players at all when the rewards were high. Hence, a large number of warships from the European server went out to sea at this moment, ready to follow the original players to ride on this wave of popularity and pick up money together. As time passed, the party in the Kuelong Ocean continued to increase in popularity. Not only were the players from the original server and the European server paying attention, but even the players from the other 3 servers could not sit still. They all protested in the forum, asking why such a chance to pick up money was only available to the European server and the original server, and they wanted it too. However, the officials did not reply to their protest. Hence, the players from the Naraka server, Asia server, and Africa server changed their strategy. They started to act cute in the official forum, hoping that the Deer Battle officials would allow them to join in. In order to achieve their goal, the dog officials that they usually talked about had now become the Deer Battle officials. Regarding this, Lu Wu only had one thing to say: hypocrites. However, after investigating the situation in the Kuelong Ocean, Lu Wu also had the idea of letting the players from the other 3 servers join in. This was because the players from the original server and the European server would not be able to eat such a big cake. Many of these heavenly soul-level beasts were creatures that had lived in the underworld sea for a long time. They were extremely powerful, and it would be difficult for all 5 servers to eat this cake even if they joined forces. It would be a complete waste of resources to rely on the original server and the European server. After some hesitation, Lu Wu still chose to start the event. At this moment, a game notification rang in the minds of all the players. Frowny face server announcement: the cross-server fishing competition begins now. During the battle for supremacy in the Kuelong Ocean, the fish caught by the players will be counted into points, and the rewards will be distributed according to the server ranking. The points were as follows: normal fish, 5 points; spiritual fish, 50 points; spiritual fish, 500 points; spiritual fish, 5,000 points; heavenly soul fish, 50,000 points. The current ranking of the servers was as follows: Baki Camp, 0 points; Tsongshu Camp, 0 points; Hell Camp, 0 points; Devil Spine Camp, 0 points; Tribal Camp, 0 points. As the game notification rang, the teleportation notification rang in the minds of the players from other servers other than the European server and the original server. This teleportation was different from the previous ones, as there was no time limit. In other words, as long as they were online, they could click on the teleportation function at any time. At this moment, the players from the other 3 servers were excited. At first, they thought that the damned officials would ignore them since they did not receive any feedback, but they did not expect them to start the event quietly. Hence, a large number of players from other servers teleported to the Kuelong Ocean. At this moment, the Kuelong Ocean was completely lively. As many players who came from other servers did not even buy any fishing gear when they arrived, they were suddenly in a dilemma as they looked at the dense shoals of fish on the surface of the ocean. As a result, a showy move was made. The live chat channels of all the servers were in an uproar. Look, the Motherf * King Hell server is cheating again. They actually fried fish this time. Is this F * King fishing? This is against the rules, isn't it? Does it count as an event point? Fishing? Screw you, we don't even have fishing gear. How are we supposed to fish? Brothers, dive into the ocean and let's catch fish. Only fools fish. Bastard, this fish has already bitten my bait and you're trying to steal it. XX, I'm stealing from you. Trash server, go to hell. I'm not fishing anymore. Brothers, coordinates XXX. Those unlucky guys are up to no good. I'm going to kill them. F * CK, I caught a heavenly spirit sea fish. It's taking off. I got 2 spiritual sea fish. It's really a gold mine. Crayon Shinchan didn't lie to me. Brothers, can you come and help me? The idiot flying a plane from Hell server has been blowing fish around me. How am I supposed to fish? Can a wizard come and help me? Get an elemental turret to shoot him down. I just saw an unlucky guy. He actually grabbed the hook and jumped into the mouth of a heavenly spirit sea fish. Does he think that hanging the hook in the fish's mouth will count as an event point? What a talent! Where's the battle support in the team? Hurry up and provide us with ammunition. We're out of stock. Blowing fish is King awesome. Your battle support has been eaten by the fish. Oh yeah, I'm in the fish's stomach now. I'll send you one last message. The mech is about to melt. Bye-bye, see you in 3 hours. At this moment, the Kuelong Ocean was full of devils. According to the tradition of the ocean hegemony, this was supposed to be an extremely serious and tragic battle to determine the final king. However, this time was an accident. The players who had arrived had completely broken the rules between them. They were constantly putting on a show. It was impossible for them to have a good fight at this moment. In the end, the heavenly spirit-level beasts couldn't take it anymore and united, starting to massacre the players. However, the players were still very happy. While they continued to farm points and carry bricks, they also fought against each other crazily. What the hell? Chapter 657. With the arrival of the players, the battle for supremacy in the Kuelong Ocean had a complete change in style. Under normal circumstances, in the sea hegemony battle, the contested sea area would be divided into countless small battlefields. Then, the participants would expand their territories bit by bit and fight their way to the center of the sea area from all directions to carry out the final decision. This process was extremely cruel. Basically, the sea beasts that arrived were already prepared to face death. However, with the arrival of the players, everything changed drastically. It was impossible for them to have a good fight. The world was vast, but fishing and carrying bricks were the most important things to the players. In the beginning, the players from the original server and the European server could still fish in order to accumulate points. However, with the arrival of the players from the other 3 servers, the original server and the European server stopped fishing. To them, the players from the other servers were too detestable. For example, a few players were fishing in a small boat, but the players from the Hell server were hovering above their heads in a plane, dropping bombs to blow up the fish. There were even players from the Hell server who took out the newly developed plasma cannon and started electrocuting the fish without restraint. The other 2 servers were not any better. The players from the non-Asian server and the non-Asian server who arrived in a hurry did not prepare fishing rods and other props. Hence, they jumped into the sea and started catching fish. This interfered with the normal fishing experience of the players from the original server and the European server. Therefore, a war inevitably broke out. The players from all the servers started their daily quarrel again. They only had one thought in mind. As long as they were not from their server, they would all die. The sea beasts that could no longer tolerate it began to take the initiative to attack the players. The scene suddenly became even more chaotic. Shouts, roars, curses, explosions. The Kuelong Ocean was in a complete mess at this moment. The forces of the Kuelong Ocean, who were hiding on the island to observe the situation, were completely dumbfounded. To the forces of the Kuelong Ocean, the battle for supremacy was a very serious battle. The winner would also obtain the sea area and start a new chapter in the sea area. However, with the addition of the players, the war couldn't go on at all. The sea beasts that participated in the war felt extremely helpless. It was not easy for me to get such an opportunity. Why is it so difficult for me to have a good fight? The thought of the few dark-skinned fellows who specialized in fishing hooks into their mouths made them furious. Kill. All of you die. At this moment, the sea beasts went crazy and danced with the players. This battle couldn't be stopped once it started, and it didn't stop until midnight. Under the bright moonlight, the chaotic battle continued. The sea beasts attacked the players attacked the sea beasts, the players attacked the players, and the sea beasts attacked the sea beasts. In the end, the sea beasts were so bloodthirsty that they couldn't even tell friend from foe. In the end, an old sea beast made a suggestion. hoping that all the contenders for hegemony of the sea region would temporarily unite and clean up these unknown creatures before starting the final battle. Under normal circumstances, the proud heavenly spiritual fish would never listen to anyone's orders. But this time, against the player clan, they chose to cooperate. This was something that had never happened before in the history of the battles between the overlords of the sea region. For the first time ever, these sea beasts, which had been fighting on their own, decided to work together to fight the enemy. It could be said that apart from the player clan, no other faction had achieved this. With the cooperation of the heavenly spiritual fish, the pressure on the players increased. But they were still happy. They had to kill the players from other servers, and they wouldn't let go of the fishes that they caught. Although the players were no match for these sea beasts, the unique characteristic of the players was that they were persistent and persistent. After 3 hours, the revived players would immediately teleport back to the Kuelong Ocean and continue to cause trouble. Cause trouble. Cause trouble. The night passed quickly. The sea beasts that united realized that they couldn't kill these sand sculptures no matter how hard they tried. After clearing one batch, another batch would come, and the process was endless. What made the sea beasts even more intolerable was that these creatures liked to lean on them, especially the greed in their eyes when they looked at them. Am I not scary enough? The furious sea beasts started killing again, unwilling to give up. Kill. Kill. This killing spree lasted for another day. Their stamina was rapidly depleted in such an intense battle. If it was a normal sea region battle, these heavenly spiritual sea beasts would have many ways to recover their stamina. One of them was to devour their opponents, digest them quickly, and then obtain nutrients. However, this method didn't exist for the players. They would turn into black fog upon death, so how could they be used as nutrient? This made many heavenly spiritual sea beasts think that there was something wrong with their bodies. They had devoured tens of thousands of lives along with their ships, but not only did they not obtain any nutrients, they didn't even feel full. I'm afraid that I've eaten a fake creature. This kind of battle went on for a full 2 days. The heavenly spirit sea beasts had had enough, and they became dispirited. They seemed to know that they couldn't kill all the players, so they became extremely perfunctory when killing the players, and their faces were filled with disdain. As the saying goes, the first drumbeat of energy, the second will be weak, and the third will be exhausted. This was the state that the sea beasts were in right now. In the beginning, they planned to kill all the players in the sea region before starting the battle. However, after several attempts, they became extremely exhausted. Because there was no end to the killing no matter how much they killed, it was meaningless to continue killing aimlessly. The players made these sea beasts feel defeated. Next, the players made these sea beasts understand what it meant to go overboard. As soon as they stopped killing, the number of players in the Kuelong Ocean began to increase rapidly. Faced with such a situation, the sea beasts completely gave up. After another day of struggling, the sea beasts finally chose to compromise. They were prepared to wait for the chaos in the sea region to end before starting the battle for supremacy. At this moment, the players had successfully disrupted this extremely serious sea region war. Seeing the heavenly spiritual sea beasts leaving with their underlings, the players were extremely sad. Because the gold mine was gone. Such a good opportunity to carry bricks had ended in just 3 days. It was really hard to accept. Although it was a pity, the players were naturally unwilling to stay in this sea region since there were no more fishes. They began to return. About a day later, the sea beasts that were secretly observing the situation in the Kuelong Ocean realized that the players had left. At this moment, their desire to be the overlord of the sea region was ignited once again. Without any hesitation, they gathered again. The bloody massacre seemed to be about to begin again. However, things weren't as simple as they thought. The battle for supremacy of the sea region had begun again. The players who received the news were like cats that smelled blood. They rushed to the battlefield decisively, ready to fish for gold. "Players, come. Let's have fun together," Sea beasts, happy my ass. Get lost, hurry up and get lost. A mental blow was far more torturous than a physical wound. And the players were experts at mental attack. Although they only wanted to carry bricks for money and had no other intentions, their actions made the sea beasts feel extremely uncomfortable. The greedy eyes of the players seemed to be giving them mental hint. Don't fight, you can only hit me. This is unreasonable. Isn't the underworld sea god going to intervene? The sea beasts were extremely sad and angry. The new overlord war lasted less than a day. After suffering a loss, the heavenly soul sea monsters didn't even bother to attack the players anymore. After all, they couldn't kill all of them. Instead, they looked at the players with disdain. As the number of players continued to increase in the Kuelong Ocean, the sea beasts didn't hesitate and decisively chose to retreat. They didn't even need to inform each other. If they couldn't afford to offend them, they would hide. This made the players of the 5 servers depressed. This time, the gold-moving event ended in just 1 day. It was 3 times shorter than the previous event. The players who were unwilling to give up kept their warships and secretly stationed on the nearby islands, waiting for the next battle for supremacy. At least they were sure of one thing. Since the damned official event hadn't ended, it meant that the gold mine could still be moved. However, the sea beasts were extremely vigilant this time. They observed outside the Kuelong Ocean for half a month and even swam to the border several times to test the waters. After confirming that the player family had really dispersed, they charged into the Kuelong Ocean with ferocious expressions, ready to start another massacre. However, when they each occupied an area, the players who had been hiding on the nearby islands for a long time jumped out before the battle even started. Players. Come on, bro. Sea beasts. Many sea beasts who were initially full of ambition and were willing to sacrifice their lives for the sake of becoming stronger had completely broken down. F***CKU. Whoever wants to be the overlord of the sea region can go ahead. I'm not going to entertain you. You're amazing. If you're not leaving, I'm leaving. The sea beasts who had broken down had no intention of continuing the battle. They didn't even need to kill each other this time. Seeing the players coming from the nearby islands, the sea beasts exchanged glances with the players. From the other party's gaze and movement, they could roughly understand what the other party wanted to do. At this moment, there were only 2 words in the sea beasts' minds: I'm leaving. The first battle lasted for 3 days, the second battle lasted for 1 day, and the third battle for supremacy ended just by exchanging glances. Seeing this scene, the players instantly cursed. They even wanted to question these heavenly spirit sea beasts. Do you have ambition? Do you have dreams? What's the difference between a fish that doesn't want to become an ocean spirit and the overlord of the sea region and a salted fish? If the heavenly spirit beasts heard this, they would definitely give the players an answer. I'm just a salted fish that doesn't want to improve. Don't stop me, I'm leaving today. I don't want this lousy sea region even if it's for free. Looking at the gold mines moving further and further away from their sight, the players beat their chests and stomped their feet, hating the fact that they didn't reap a fortune. Thinking of this, they immediately picked up their weapons and started hammering the players from other servers around them. It's all your fault. F***CKU. If it weren't for you, I would have been rich. Hence, the war began. However, this time, it was between the players. Chapter 658. The battle for supremacy in the Kuelong Ocean finally came to an end with the departure of the sea beast. At the same time, the players' quarrel also came to an end with the notification of the end of the event. Apart from the original server and the European server, the players from the other servers returned to their own servers reluctantly. Especially the players from the Naraka server, they were extremely reluctant to leave. They fought the battle ferociously. Looking at the environment of the original server and the European server, the blue sky, the mountains, the rivers, and the islands, it was impossible for them not to be envious. After all, the environment of the entire Naraka server was quite harsh in comparison. Especially the Blue Valley ruins, it was a wasteland. Everything was dilapidated, and the surrounding area was filled with volcanoes and magma. It was not that the Naraka server did not have beautiful environments, but such places were usually occupied by extremely powerful creatures. It was unrealistic for the players from the Naraka server to seize the territory from these creatures at the current stage. With such unbalanced emotions, the players from the Naraka server attacked viciously. They all had the same mentality: I'll let you live a good life, die. Although the event had ended, there were still many players from the original server and the European server who were unwilling to leave after tasting the sweetness and stayed for a few more days. However, this time, the sea beasts did not return, as if they had given up fighting for the sovereignty of this ocean. In the end, the players accepted this helpless outcome. At the same time, they hoped to see such a scene again in their lifetime and continue to earn a sum of money from it. This outcome was something that the forces in the Kuelong Ocean did not expect. After this incident, they realized a very serious problem. It seemed that there were no more fish in this sea area. They were not sure if this had ever happened in the history of the underworld sea, nor did they know what the consequences would be. Although this did not affect their daily lives, they still felt that it was very strange. They had a sense of déjà vu, as if this sea had been abandoned. However, facing this outcome, they could not change it other than accepting it. In fact, a few old forces in the Kuelong Ocean were very worried about this. They were afraid that the ocean without the sea spirit would attract disaster or be abandoned by the underworld sea god. Therefore, the old men from these forces gritted their teeth and decided to go out to the sea to find a sea beast to inherit the position of the overlord of the Kuelong Ocean. With such a mood, these old men set off. His target was the heaven spirit sea beast in the nearby sea region. In the void ocean. The giant blue whale. I'm not going. I'm just a salted fish. Don't talk to me about being the overlord of the ocean. I don't want it. Go to the other fish in the neighboring ocean and ask. Scarlet Sea. 8 claws of extreme frost. Is there such a good thing? Wait, where are you from? Kuelong Ocean? Ahem, I don't have much fighting spirit recently. I just gave birth to a few hundred children and I have to take care of them. Why don't you go to the neighboring sea area and ask the old turtle? Jade Spring Sea, Psychic Turtle. Scram. I'm just an island. Don't talk to me about being the overlord of the sea. I'm going to sleep. If you disturb me again, I'll eat you. This kind of answer kept repeating in the nearby waters. After searching for a while, these old fellows returned to the Kuelong Ocean dejectedly and accepted a fact. It seemed like there would be no more sea spirits in this sea region. As for how long these days would last, they did not know. They only hoped that the sea region where their race lived and thrived would welcome a new ruler as soon as possible. As for the player clan, these old fellows were rather resentful. However, they did not dare to say it out loud. For the sake of their lives, it was better to hold it in. After all, if they went crazy, it would be a small matter if they lost their lives, but it was possible that their entire race would be in disarray. With the end of the battle for supremacy of the sea region, the players' lives returned to normal. However, compared to before, the number of brick-moving players who used fishing to earn soul coins had increased a lot. Other than the impact of the major incident in the Kuelong Ocean, this was also greatly related to Crayon Shinchan's detailed fishing guide. High-level guides would always give rise to many followers. For example, Bakey's earliest method of leveling up by trapping. At that time, this method of leveling up was originally used by the assassin players. However, after seeing the efficiency, the mage players who lived in the sewers at that time also followed suit and completely gave up on their original method of leveling up. It was the same this time. Crayon Shinchan had already planned out the specific location and the tools to use for fishing. Hence, many newbie players needed to explore and advance, but they could just use it directly. Therefore, many players who did not have the strength to carry out other brick-moving activities began to go out to sea and embark on the path of sea fishing and brick-moving. It could be said that Crayon Shinchan had started a small-scale craze for fishing and brick moving. However, some interested players on the forum had recorded Crayon Shinchan's post. This was because they believed that this would be an important clue to solving the biggest unsolved case in the forum, the mystery of Crayon Shinchan's true identity. In response, some bounty hunters were prepared to focus on the sea fishing crowd, especially the few locations marked in the post. However, how could Mo Xiaoxin, who had always been cautious, not have considered this point? Brick moving? I'm already a partner in the Soul Prayer liquor business, why would I still need to carry bricks? That's only for low-end players. I'm a high-end player now, so carrying bricks is beneath me. Before the detailed fishing and brick moving tutorial was given in the post, Mo Xiaoxin had already considered this problem. It was not that he had given up on sea fishing, but that sea fishing would only be his hobby from now on, and it would no longer be a bitter brick moving activity. Hence, it was impossible to find him using the coordinates he provided to find clues. Mo Xiaoxin was extremely confident about this. After all, everyone now had these coordinates, so the number of players fishing in this area was not small. It would be extremely troublesome to filter them out. Moreover, how could he not have a backup plan and share all the coordinates he knew? He must have left behind a few coordinates that he often went fishing at. Hence, the actions of these bounty hunters were really ridiculous to him. However, his recent contact with Gu Yu and the others made Mo Xiaoxin feel like a sheep mixed in a pack of wolves, and he would be devoured at any time. However, until now, he had disguised himself well and had not been suspected. He was even considered a very humble and polite person by Gu Yu and the others. They did not associate him with the arrogant and domineering Crayon Shinchan in the forum at all. Hence, from Crayon Shinchan's point of view, even the wall scammers hadn't found him. It was too much of a joke for a few rotten potatoes and rotten eggs to want to take his life. This arrogant mood lasted for about a week until his mother sent him a life-threatening message. Only then did Mo Xiaoxin restrain himself. This was also what Mo Xiaoxin felt the most helpless about. There was only one person in this world who could restrain him, and that was his mother. Although the business of the soul-praying wine had started and there would be high returns in the future, Mo Xiaoxin was still worried. This was because he could get about 7,000 soul coins from selling a bottle of wine. It was still too far for him to earn 10 million soul coins. Most importantly, even if the players could earn soul coins faster in the future, and the soul-praying wine would sell well because of this, Chu Zue was the only one who could brew the soul-praying wine at this stage. His energy was limited. If he did not train his disciples, the income from selling the soul-praying wine would be limited. It was not that he could earn more if more players wanted to buy it. It depended on whether he could brew it or not. Due to these factors, Mo Xiaoxin felt that the road to redemption was long. However, there was not much time left for him. Beiki, Mansion of the Dead. Half a month had passed since the big incident in the Kuelong Ocean. Recently, the players had begun to actively prepare for war. This was because their expedition was about to begin again. During this time, the officials started an event called Conquering the Endless Forest. At the same time, there was one more active NPC in the Mansion of the Dead. The specific content of the event was to kill the zombie warriors and obtain points. The players could then use the points to exchange for rewards at the event NPC. This was a big surprise for the players. From the players' point of view, the stingy officials would only release a wave of activities during the event period. It was almost impossible for them to release welfare activities during normal times. However, this time, the stupid officials had unexpectedly started an event. The players had never been soft-hearted towards the exploitative officials. They were actively preparing for it. Part of the reason why the players were determined to wage a war against the zombie clan was related to the awakening of the demonic god. Initially, the players had different opinions about the demonic god. Some players even thought that the rescued demonic god was a complete burden. However, after the siege of the European server, the players no longer had such thoughts. If it weren't for the demonic god, the European server's sneak attack would have embarrassed them in front of the entire server. Therefore, the players were filled with gratitude towards the demonic god. It was not only because of Gu Yu's personal reputation that they kept the demonic god alive. Previously, after the demonic god had awakened, he had been recuperating in the mansion of the dead. Although the soul-praying wine had healed the damage to his soul, his physical injuries had not healed. However, at this moment, the demonic god's injuries had mostly healed. The players were very clear about what this meant. After the demonic god had awakened, Guyu had explained the grudge between Hidorigami and the demonic god in detail to the players on the forum. From the birth of the demonic god to the destruction of the giant clan, to the final pursuit. This was a grudge that spanned across a long period of time. There was no possibility of compromise between the two sides. The players sympathized with the demonic god's misfortune. They also understood why the demonic god wanted to kill Hidorigami so much. They also understood that during the early days of the Battle of the Dead, Guyu had suddenly obtained an incomparably powerful strength and engaged in a super grand battle with Hidorigami, who had awakened from the burial grounds. This was a question that many veteran players had in mind back then. At that time, Guyu, who was possessed by the demonic god, had displayed a strength that was completely beyond the players' imagination. However, Guyu had never explained it on the forum. As time passed, everyone had forgotten about it. However, this time, many veteran players who had experienced that period in Beiki were suddenly enlightened. They understood the reason behind all of this. Now that the demonic god was about to recover from his injuries, the battle between him and Hidorigami was inevitable. Back then, the demonic god had gone alone to face Hidorigami and the Corpse Clan army, which was why he was defeated. However, this time, the players had decided to hold the line for the demonic god. They would follow the demonic god to crush the Corpse Clan and put an end to this grudge that spanned a long period of time. Chapter 659. Sunluo Region, Central Main City. This city used to be the pride of the Nether race. As history progressed, it was filled with the glory of the Nether race's growth. But now, the main city was in ruins, and the glory no longer existed. The current Sunluo region belonged to the Corpse race, and the main city that the Nether race built with their own hands was also occupied by the Corpse race. The Nether race had completely become a thing of the past, and the only thing left in this region were stories and legends. Under the law of the jungle, reality was always so cruel, but there was no right or wrong. Because a certain chapter in the history of the Sunluo region was also ended by the Nether race, and then they would open a new chapter. Royalty was not eternal. This was the law of survival of the fittest in the underworld, and it did not only belong to the Sunluo region. Even without the Corpse race, under the wheel of time, a new disruptor would always be born, and then he would open a new chapter, continuing the legend that belonged to him and his followers. At this time, inside the main city, the Corpse race's high-ranking generals surrounded Hidorigami's huge body, waiting for their leader Meiba's instructions. And around them, 3 corpse mountains were slowly wriggling toward the sleeping Hidorigami. Approaching. In fact, the process of creating these 3 new corpse mountains puzzled Meiba and the entire Corpse race. Just a few months ago, the Death region suddenly invaded. The sudden crisis made the Corpse race very uneasy. The reason for their uneasiness was not the Death region, but the Player Clan. Because if the Player Clan stabbed the Corpse race in the back during the war between the two regions, then the Corpse race would be in an extremely passive position. And the Corpse race was not afraid of the Ghoul Corpse army that invaded the Death region. The reason was because of the Corpse race's racial talent. They could rely on the enemy's corpses to continuously strengthen themselves. Therefore, war might be an opportunity for them to rapidly develop. After all, the Ghoul Corpse army was different from the Player Clan forces that attacked from the north. They would not turn into black mist and dissipate after death. Although the death region that they had gathered together made the nether race stray and allowed the corpse race to rise, Mabah believed that the corpse race would not repeat the same mistake. However, this battle was clearly beyond her imagination. An endless stream of ghouls surged over like a crazed tide. Although the corpse race could rely on corpses to strengthen themselves, the ghouls did not give them a chance to collect their corpses. They charged toward the main city with no regard for their lives. This battle was extremely difficult. However, the tables were soon turned. The battle only lasted for half a day before something strange happened. The corpse ghouls suddenly slowed down and became abnormally sluggish. In the end, the Ghoul Corpse Legion was completely stunned on the spot, no longer fighting back despite being slaughtered by them. Such a situation was unbelievable to the succubus. However, no matter what the reason was, she naturally would not miss such a good opportunity. She immediately led the Corpse Race army to slaughter all the Corpse Ghoul Legion that was stunned in place. It could be said that the outcome of this battle was completely out of Mabah's expectations. She even felt that it was absurd and unreal. However, what he didn't know was that the reason why the Corpse Clan was able to win this battle so easily was all thanks to the Player Clan that they were originally very worried about. If the Player family hadn't gone to the Jade-Shattered Planet, destroyed the Ghoul factory behind the portal, and killed the demigod controller behind it, they wouldn't have been able to secure the victory so easily. In the end, the corpse race welcomed a great harvest. These dead ghouls were refined into 3 mountain corpses. This time, they were prepared to heal Hidorigami's soul and body, which had been severely injured by the demonic god. They had to wake Hidorigami up before the demonic god woke up. This way, they would have the upper hand and the Player Clan would no longer be a threat. Even the entire land of Baki would become a new territory for the Corpse Clan to expand. At this moment, the 3 huge corpse mountains were moving closer to Hidorigami, who was in deep sleep. Mabah, who was standing below, floated into the air and began to control the corpse mountains to melt. Then, they slowly covered Hidorigami's body. At this moment, the corpse mountains began to shrink rapidly at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. The dark mist inside continuously flowed into Hidorigami's body, nourishing his soul and body. During the healing process, the wounds on Hidorigami's body slowly disappeared as the corpse mountains melted. This process lasted for about half a day. The corpse mountain that had taken a lot of effort to create had completely melted, leaving not a single trace behind. At the same time, the wounds on Hidorigami's body were completely healed. However, Mabah wasn't satisfied. She began to control the second corpse mountain to cover Hidorigami and continued to use it to replenish the divine power in Hidorigami's body. When the corpse mountain had also melted, Mabah's face revealed a look of anticipation. While waiting, Hidorigami suddenly opened his crimson eyes. The blood and chi in his body suddenly soared into the sky, turning into a dense bloody mist that floated above the main city, Baki, Mansion of the Dead. The moment Hidorigami woke up, the demonic god also opened his eyes. It wasn't because the wounds on his body had completely healed, but because he could feel Hidorigami's breath. At this moment, he stood up without any hesitation. Although his wounds were not completely healed, to the demonic god, it was enough. In this battle, he wanted to end this grudge once and for all. He wanted to crush Hidorigami's body and soul. Thinking of this, the demonic god let out a roar toward the sky. Then, his body soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, his body became as huge as a mountain. Bathed in the sunlight, his blood-red body dashed toward the land of Sunluo, to welcome the battle that belonged to him. Seeing the demonic god leave, the players were caught off guard. Initially, they thought that the demonic god would go with them. However, it was obvious that the demonic god did not think so. The demonic god has left. Should we follow him? Nonsense, I've already bought a bunch of enhancement potions. Let's go. Where's the commander? Come out and gather everyone. You're going to charge into the enemy's main crystal alone? That's very demonic god. Let's go, stop talking nonsense. If we're late, we'll have to drag the demonic god's corpse back to the city. As a berserker, I've been assigned by our guild leader to drag corpses. I'm still traumatized. The demonic god is really heavy. I almost died of exhaustion after dragging him for a whole day. Tong Gua drinks dispirited. JPG. Haha, luckily I'm a sorcerer. During that corpse-dragging operation, I've been casting spells to cover your retreat. I wasn't tired at all. I even collected the corpses of 3 corpse clan warriors along the way and earned a small fortune. I'm also in the corpse-carrying team. What the brother above said has brought back the trauma in my heart. The demonic god is really heavy. I worked hard with the strength gem activated the whole time. I felt like I was moving a mountain. Does this count as a player moving a mountain? Big Meat Shield smokes JPG. Ha ha ha, the sewer assassin said that warriors are meant to do heavy work. Otherwise, what's the use of having you guys? Laughing emoji. So let's go quickly. If we're late, the demonic god will lie down and never get up. Then we'll be busy. Following the departure of the demonic god, the Bakey live chat channel was in chaos. Although they did not expect the demonic god to leave without a word, the players still gathered together and prepared to head to the land of Sun Luo to support the demonic god. In the organizations of the major guilds, the well-prepared players rushed back to Bakey through the teleportation circle. A huge army of players assembled outside the Mansion of the Dead in the live chat channel. Yin Xiaoqi, who was the commander of this battle, shouted, "Let's go!" The army of players began to march toward the land of Sun Luo. In the land of Sun Luo, Hidorigami, who had just woken up, sensed his opponent's aura at the same time as the demonic god. As if it was fated, this pair of sworn enemies had both woken up at this time. Hidorigami's figure floated into the air and flew toward the direction where the demonic god was rushing toward. Seeing Hidorigami's sudden departure, Meiba, who was watching him closely, felt her heart tighten. She quickly contacted Hidorigami through her soul and asked for the reason. Hidorigami's reply was only 4 words, "Demonic god, let's fight." Hidorigami's reply made Meiba realize what had happened. She immediately gathered the corpse clan warriors and began to chase after Hidorigami. A few hours later, in the sky north of the land of Sun Luo, 2 figures as huge as mountains collided with each other. The power of the blood precept in both of their bodies was activated at the same time. The rich power of blood and chi burst forth from the point of collision, dyeing half of the sky red. Roar! At this moment, the demonic god's eyes turned deep black. A waning moon appeared in his pupils. Then, he turned his head and looked at Hidorigami. As they stared at each other, the power of negative emotions exploded and started to invade Hidorigami's soul. Hidorigami, who was looking directly into the demonic god's eyes, was suddenly dazed. What welcomed him was the demonic god's heavy punch. The rich power of blood and chi formed a blood-red vortex that sucked Hidorigami into it and continuously strangled him. Just as the demonic god was about to attack again, Hidorigami exhaled a thick, hot mist. The dazed look in his eyes disappeared, and he raised his palm to receive the demonic god's second punch. His broken soul did not allow him to manipulate many negative emotions. This was also the reason why Hidorigami could easily break free from the demonic god's emotion precept. "Great demonic god of the underworld!" The demonic god roared. Suddenly, 6 blood-red arms grew out of his back and attacked Hidorigami again. The 8 arms waved and created countless blood-red fist prints that filled half the sky. Hidorigami could not block them in time and was blasted to the ground. However, the demonic god did not stop and dove down. The blood-red fist prints that filled the sky followed the demonic god's descent. The earth shook violently, and the mountains in the surrounding area were shattered and collapsed. Violent shockwaves radiated out in all directions. Feeling the pain from his body, the blood-red color in Hidorigami's eyes became more intense. A blood-red lotus bloomed in his eyes, and the ferocity in his heart was completely awakened. Roar! Driven by his instincts, he opened his mouth and roared. The surface of his body was ignited with blood-red flames, and a giant blood-red snake appeared in front of him. It bit the demonic god's right shoulder and began to absorb the power in his body. The demonic god was very familiar with this move. He immediately took a step back and stomped hard on Hidorigami's chest, who was on the ground. With a loud boom, the ground was crushed under his feet. A huge pit was formed and smoke and dust billowed around it. Hidorigami was also stomped into the ground. At this moment, the demonic god's body began to grow rapidly. In the blink of an eye, he had become a giant that was thousands of meters tall. You were no match for me in the past, and you're still the same after becoming a god. As he spoke, the demonic god stabbed his right arm into the ground and grabbed Hidorigami, who was buried deep in the ground. I shall grant you death. The demonic god grabbed half of Hidorigami's body with both his hands, and the power in his body surged as he planned to split Hidorigami into two. At this moment, a blood-red spear suddenly shot from afar and pierced into the demonic god's forehead. At this moment, the demonic god was momentarily dazed. It was as if his soul had been pierced by the blood-red spear, and he could not help but tremble. Blood grinder! Blood dragon dance! The woman's voice came from afar. Hidorigami, who was in the demonic god's hands, suddenly released a powerful force and broke free from the demonic god's restraints. Countless blood-red dragons appeared on the surface of Hidorigami's body and coiled around the demonic god's arms, binding them tightly. Blood malice! Zombie god's howl! The voice came again. Hidorigami suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a thick, dark red fog that quickly enveloped the demonic god. As Hidorigami howled, the thick, dark red fog that enveloped the demonic god suddenly exploded. In the billowing dust, the demonic god was pushed back a few steps. Blood demon! Blood god's body! At this moment, Hidorigami's body began to grow taller, and the thick, blood-red power formed a crystal-clear protective layer on the surface of his body. Then, he punched the demonic god's chest heavily. In an instant, the blood-red fog on the surface of Hidorigami's body shrunk into his right arm like a tidal wave and exploded at the front end. The demonic god was sent flying by this blow, smashing through several small mountains along the way. He fell to the ground with a loud thud, causing the ground to tremble. Start setting up the formation. I will hold the demonic god back. This time, I want him dead. A cold voice resounded in the surroundings. The Corpse Clan warriors who had followed closely behind immediately surrounded the demonic god from all directions. At this moment, the demonic god had already realized what the woman from the Corpse Clan was going to do. He immediately stood up and stomped on the ground. Instantly, the ground shook violently, and a large number of Corpse Clan warriors fell to the ground. Seeing this scene from afar, a cold glint flashed in Mayba's eyes. Then, she murmured softly and controlled Hidorigami to pounce on the demonic god. A close combat battle of fists and flesh began. Although Hidorigami was very strong, his physical body was far from the demonic god's. It would be difficult for him to hold the demonic god back in close combat. As the number of injuries on his body increased, Hidorigami's strength was obviously weakening. At this moment, Mayba, who was far away, waved her hand downwards. Suddenly, a mountain of corpses below her spewed out a large amount of dark red fog towards Hidorigami. Hiss! Under Mayba's control, Hidorigami took a deep breath and absorbed all the dark red fog into his body. Then, the blood-red flames on the surface of his body burned even more vigorously. His fist that was clashing with the demonic god was actually evenly matched. At this moment, the crescent moon in the demonic god's eyes shone brightly. The power of negative emotions surged towards Hidorigami, causing him to freeze in place once again. Seizing this opportunity, the demonic god raised his hand and grabbed Hidorigami's neck. With an angry roar, he tried to break it. At this moment, a blood-red spear came from afar and once again hit the demonic god between his eyebrows. As his soul trembled, the demonic god and Hitorigami froze in place. Both parties seemed to wake up from their daze at the same time, and the battle began once again. With Hitorigami and Meiba working together to restrain the demonic god had no time to deal with the Corpse Clan warriors that were swarming towards him. As the Corpse Clan warriors formed a huge circle around the demonic god, the Corpse Clan's unique corpse prison formation gradually took shape. Countless wisps of dark fog rose from the ground and turned into thousands of chains that wrapped around the demonic god's body, restricting his movements. At this moment, Hitorigami finally had a chance to counterattack. Under Meiba's control, he bit down on the demonic god's neck. His sharp teeth pierced through the skin and began to absorb his strength. At the same time, a thick dark red fog flowed through Hitorigami's teeth and into the demonic god's body. At this moment, the demonic god let out a painful roar. The boiling blood in his body cooled down rapidly after coming into contact with the dark red fog. The demonic god felt as if his movements had become sluggish. Meiba had rehearsed this battle countless times in her mind. Although this battle had started in a hurry, Meiba was still confident that she would win. Looking at the demonic god who was roaring and struggling, Meiba's lips curled up. "Obediently become my nourishment." Just as she expected, the demonic god began to weaken. At this moment, Meiba suddenly frowned and turned to look in the direction of the Arctic abyss in the north. She saw a large number of figures swarming toward the opening in the ice mountain. At this moment, Yin Xiaoqi's voice sounded in the player's live chat channel. "Everyone, pay attention. The demonic god seems to be sealed. We definitely can't interfere in a battle between gods, but we can break the formation that is restricting the demonic god and help him. First, clear the Corpse Clan warriors around the formation. Kill." As soon as Yin Xiaoqi's voice fell, the players began to move. The warriors in the front row lit up with green gems that represented their speed. Their running speed gradually increased, and they began to sprint. "Boss Demonic God, I'm coming! Help Boss Demonic God get out of here and smash the heads of those who set up the formation! Roar! Kill! If I don't level up today, I won't rest. I'm not going to sleep. I bought 2 months' worth of nutrient fluid just for this battle. If my liver doesn't die, I'll buy another year's worth. I'm not afraid of you." The scene that Meiba didn't want to see the most had happened. At this moment, the players from the Baki camp had crossed the Arctic abyss and arrived.